winter retreat for the Raleigh City Council.
Awesome. All right, our first topic is our budget and financial outlook. Happy to welcome up our budget director, Sadia Sattar, and our finance director, Allison Bradshaw.
All right, good morning, everybody. What an exciting time to talk about budget at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning and finance, but here we are. As per usual, every year at the retreat, Allison and I provide you with a budgetary and financial outlook, and this promises to be exactly that same format. Of course, we've sprinkled in a couple of topics that Allison will be covering that City Council has asked some additional detail on. So our agenda today, I've got to look here. There we go. Let's start with talking about the budget that we're currently in, that being the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. And I just wanted to remind you all of some of our key investments. After that, Allison will take over and she will be talking about revenues, in particular, how our current property tax revenues are performing and what those property taxes, what those implications are going to be for the upcoming budget process. And of course, she will also talk about our other revenues. And then Allison will go a little bit, and then I'll take over and talk to you about whatever Allison is saying to us, how that's informing the upcoming budget process. What are the budgetary pressures that we will be facing as we go into another budget? And then Allison will be covering debt. A lot of you wanted some further information on steady state. She'll be covering that topic. She'll also be talking to all of you about our long-term liabilities in the city, in particular, our retirement, post-retirement benefits. And then she'll also talk to you about internal controls, and then I'll take over. So this should really be the Allison show this morning, if anything. So let's kick us off. Again, we're short on time. We're going to try to be brief but concise. So let's get to it. So let's start with the budget that we're in right now. I always show this slide to you. Oops, what happened? We're missing a couple of our data points there. Yeah, but you should have it in your printed copies. This is property tax revenues. This blue pie there is our sales tax. So the largest source of our revenues are our property taxes and our sales taxes. That's where the money comes from. About 72% of our general fund revenues come from those two sources. And then where does the money go? As you can see, the majority of that goes towards our public safety. That's our police, our fire, our emergency communication. And of course, the rest provide for all the other services that our lovely city provides our residents, which is our parks and recreation, engineering services, our roads, transportation, etc.
Other revenues is just the water fees and enterprise fees.
Those are just fees, licenses.
But that's the green. Is that what the other revenues?
So the water fees are, this is general fund.
This is general fund. So
Yes.
what comprises other, the 28?
So that could be our development service fees, our park fees, franchise tax, PAL bill,
Okay.
interest income, vehicle taxes, so
Thank you.
a bunch.
Okay. So now that you know what the budget is, let's talk a little bit about what the key investments were that we made in this current budget that we're all in at the moment. And no surprise there, the majority of that was our classification and compensation study. Again, these are general fund numbers. These are not all encompassing for all the other things that we did in our overall adopted budget. But for our key investments, the general fund contributed about 27.9 million towards the classification and comp study. Overall, citywide, it was about $35 million. Our second largest investment was in Dix Park. Overall, that was almost $12 million, about 11.7, but about 2.2 million came from the general fund. We also invested money towards a second fire academy. And then, of course, there were other operational needs that we covered for departments that involved investments in our digital assets, cybersecurity, as well as some investments in our human resources departments and other departments as well. So this is just laying the groundwork for where we are now. And then I'm going to pass it on to Allison to talk about our general fund revenues. Oh, wait, we have one more slide. I'm sorry. We've made so many investments in our employees, and that goes to show in this chart that you see over here. City Council has always asked us about what our vacancy rates have been. As you can see, we provided this chart to you in quarterly financial reports in the past, and we wanted to apprise you of where we are currently with our full-time vacancies in the city. And I'm happy to report that, as you can see, our recruitment and retaining efforts that our HR department is doing have been paying off. So as you can see, 2 years ago, or now 6 years ago, 3 years ago almost, we were at 14.4%. And now we are trending quite low at 8.8% in our vacancy. So definitely a move in the right direction. And of course, Chanel Jones, our HR director, will be talking about this in further detail when she comes and speaks to you at our first budget work session, which is just next month. So now I'm going to pass it over to Allison. Thanks, Allison.
Before we move on to that, the 8.8%, how many full-time positions does that translate to?
I do not know.
We'll call up our HR director, Arnell. Pulling that up now.
That's about 153.
153 positions. I'm doing this for the aisle. Thank you. I'm not sure.
All right, so general fund revenue. So good morning, everyone. Here is the general fund budget and, like, we're missing some data points. Hopefully they are
Yeah, we got
coming
them
on
here.
these slides. That is really strange. But yes, as Sadia just mentioned, property tax by far is our largest revenue source here in the general fund, followed by sales tax at about 20%, and then that all other bucket that I just spoke about. I'm going to be diving into these three revenues for the general fund.
I'm sorry, Alice, I want to make a correction. The HR director said it's actually 396 full-time positions. Not 300. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to spend the most time this morning on property taxes. So our property tax for FY26, we are seeing a lower projection than we had anticipated. So if you look at the bar graph on the left side of the slide, the blue bar is our FY25 actuals. And what this represents is the assessed value across the city of Raleigh. And we ended at FY25 of $105.2 billion in assessed value. The assessed value is very important because you take your tax rate at your assessed value, and that is essentially your property tax revenues that you collect in the general fund. When we put the budget together, we anticipated that we would have a growth. It's about a 1.5% growth in assessed value, and we would be at 106.8 billion. That is what the FY26 budget is based on. What we're actually now seeing in the FY26 projection is an assessed value of 105.9. So that's about a 1% decline from where we anticipated. There are really three main drivers: affordable housing exemptions, brownfield exemptions, and commercial appeals. And I'm going to specifically talk through a number of slides on each of those. So I'm sure the council is aware that there was a House Select Committee that has been set up specifically on property tax reduction and reform. The study is looking at options to reduce the property tax burden with the balancing of potential revenue impacts to local governments. So far, they've held two meetings. One was just last week, and you will see a number of slides that was presented at this House Select Committee. Their next meeting is scheduled for February 18th, and at this time, I have not seen an agenda for what that meeting will be on. So this, again, was a slide that was presented at the January 14th meeting of the House Select Committee. And I want to spend a few minutes because it really does set the conversation up. So this is a chart that was prepared by the North Carolina Department of Revenue. So this is a statewide chart. And it may be a little hard to see, but there are varying colors. And what the colors represent is the various types of exclusions for property tax purposes, dating all the way back to 2016 up to 2025. And what you can see is while there's certainly movement in the lines across the state, they're relatively close together over all of those years. And then all of a sudden you see this huge green spike, which is low and moderate income housing exclusions. It jumped 54% statewide. So I want to spend a few minutes diving into that. These two charts were also shown at the House Select Committee again on January 14th. I'm going to work kind of from left to right. So the left side of the chart is a slide that is from the Department of Revenue and the Office of State Management and Budget Services. What this identifies is low and moderate income housing units, and again, this is statewide, not just Raleigh, that are owned by a nonprofit. That is eligible. There is legal authority to do that here in the state. And the total property tax that is excluded is 6.3 billion. So this is assessed value, I guess I should say. And again, this is statewide. That's an estimated revenue loss across the state of $60 million. The top 5 counties where this happens is Wake, Mecklenburg, Durham, New Hanover, and Guilford County. And certainly you can see from the colors on the chart there that we're kind of leading the way there. I do have an estimate, and I'm gonna jump to my notes here of specifically for Wake County and for Raleigh that I got from the Wake County tax team. Sorry, bear with me for a second. Like this memorized by now here. Estimate. I may have to come back to that. My apologies. $11 million for Wake County and $6 million for Raleigh. Now, that would have been included in, much of that was included in our base, because if you go back to this chart, you know, that green, you know, we've had for a number of years. This isn't anything new. So a pretty big impact to Wake County and Raleigh. If you look at the right side of the slide here, this was a chart that was shared by Self-Help, again, also at the same committee meeting. And it really is a fascinating statistic here. So if you look at the Wake County column, and I'll sort of talk down that column there, they have estimated that here in Wake County, we have about 165,000 multifamily units. There are 94% of that is renting at below 80% AMI. And that has to do with the fact that the calculation for the 80% AMI, we have such a high median income here in Wake County that the 80% AMI rent for a family of 4, and I hate to walk in front, but that's the very last line there, is just under $2,200. And so when they analyze the rents of all of these units, 94% are falling at below 80% AMI. If those were,
Sorry, so this includes, subsidized and market rate unit? This is all the.
I believe so. This is their analysis, so I'm not exactly sure that I have all the details to answer, but it is based off of that multifamily unit,
Yes,
165.
it's
So
all
I think the answer is yes.
But not all units are excluded from.
That is correct. Yes. So that gets exactly to the next point, that if all of these units had a nonprofit ownership structure, then the estimate of revenue loss to the county would be $244 million. That estimate for Raleigh, and again, this came from our colleagues at Wake County, would be about $82 million. So again, very interesting, very fascinating.
Scary.
Very scary,
Scary.
especially from a property tax perspective. Now, clearly, from the goals of the council, you know, I think this is a story that maybe has not been significantly shared. That again, many of the units are renting at 80% or below, which is certainly a policy goal that you have.
Just adding one thing, one of the reasons that this is really concerning to us is because to create a ownership structure that's eligible for this, the nonprofit really only needs to have like 0.1% partnership, 1% partnership based on a old state court decision. So that's part of the reason that they're looking at this, but that creates obviously a lot of opportunities for, it was 54% this year growth, 21% the year before. We don't know what it could be next year.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And that was really the point of this conversation is, again, a court case from many years ago. We're now really seeing that potentially play out. So what does all that mean to Raleigh? All right, so bringing us back just specifically to the impacts to Raleigh, we have seen a 57% increase in these exemptions. So again, statewide was 54. We're higher than that with 57%. That's a 73% increase in the number of units. And we are projecting a revenue loss in FY26, again, against our base budget of between $2.5 and $3.5 million as a result of this. Moving on to brownfield. So this was one of those second drivers. I think everyone is probably very familiar with the brownfield exemption. It really is set up to encourage development. We're obviously seeing a lot of that around Raleigh, specifically for any contaminated sites. We had 52 new exemptions this year, so quite a bit of an increase from year to year.
That's in Raleigh.
This is Raleigh, yes. And in year one, if you're not familiar, the property is 90% exempt. So that's a pretty major impact again for our FY26 revenues. And we're anticipating a loss of about $1 million as a result. So with our colleagues in IT, thanks to Jim Albert, I thought a visual might be very helpful for the council and those following along. So you'll see a bunch of circles spread out over Raleigh. The blue are those brownfield exemptions. So these are specifically those in the first year. The green is the low to moderate income housing that I just spoke about. So you can see the size of the circle sort of varies, but if you look beside each circle, what you're really seeing is the amount of assessed value that is now exempt. And specifically for the green dots, and I know this might be hard to see and I don't know how it actually printed, but you're able to actually see the number of units and where they are located. And the kind of pinkish, salmon-y color, whatever, rosy color, those were just existing exempt property. So just wanted to highlight that. So that's everything from state-owned properties to churches, et cetera.
Those larger brownfield sites, the blue, you know which ones those are?
I can get you a list of those parcels, absolutely.
I mean, isn't that Lenovo? Don't they have contamination out at NC State, Carter Terminal?
That may
I don't
be.
know. But yes, you can get on it.
Yeah, I'll be glad to.
And Maya changed your question.
Okay. Sites 1 and 2 for the Omni.
Yeah.
Yes, they do as well. The Omni site. All right, so hopefully this visual is helpful to see, how this is spread around the city.
I will just say this is very counterintuitive because you would think that the nonprofit housing for low income would be concentrated in more of District C and D, where a lot of those nonprofits are operating. And I understand what you're saying is there's now this is a corporate tax strategy where poor market people may now incorporate as nonprofits. And so clearly somebody took advantage of that up in District E, but are all those nonprofits running, hundreds of units not showing up at all as a green dot?
That I don't know. What we were told is essentially along that
2025
stretch. Yes,
Okay.
yes. And along that stretch of 2025, a lot of those apartments have been in Raleigh for many, many years. And so it's possible, to your point, Mayor, the ownership structure, by changing that, right, they were either able to invest in those properties or not invest in those properties by reducing their property tax burden. So these are arguably existing. I'm sorry.
But isn't this also saying this is them getting a property tax exemption, not necessarily getting a tax credit?
Yeah, they are getting a property tax exemption. Yeah.
So they're not necessarily getting not necessarily a 4% or 9% tax credit.
Yeah, understand that.
Which is what we're seeing down here. Well, up here, this is just them going to Wake County and saying, hey, we're now a nonprofit. Can we get exempt?
That's correct, through their application.
So they're playing.
Clarification, these
Yes.
are nonprofits, like, and we'll use my district, this isn't just already existing, because before we talked about how it included all units were included. Is this all units included, or is this just nonprofits?
These are any entity in Raleigh that this is first year applications for nonprofit status.
Nonprofit, got it, thank you.
So if I bought existing property anywhere in the city and it was market, but I'm a nonprofit and I purchase it because I'm a nonprofit and I have that 1% there, I can then go to the county and get exemption and keep my rents where they are.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Which goes back to that 94% concern, right? If that ownership structure changes, as you just described, that will be 94% of the units here across the city. Substantial revenue loss.
Third of our whole general fund.
Huge. Yes. All right, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that.
And I'm sorry, was there a legislative change that allowed this to happen, or did people just catch on that this loophole was existing and they learned how to leverage it better?
Yeah,
Saying no, there wasn't a change. They just found
Yeah.
out.
Our lobbyist is coming up. Philip Isley, yes, please, so the owl can catch you.
Morning. Morning. Allison's right. This is a very hot topic in the meeting last week, maybe 2 weeks ago.
it was just last week, Phil.
You know, there was an argument made at the meeting that the affordable units that are being represented are still affordable because they don't pay property tax. So there's an interesting balance of whether this is good for taking an old property, reinvesting, getting it up to, basically 21st century standards, keeping the rents low with this exemption. And, the statute's been the statute for many years. The Court of Appeals opinion that came down in 2013 was authored by a guy named Bob Hunter. In fact, I was with him Friday night of last week. It's a black and white issue. I mean, the law says this case was one of first impression. There's fear within the General Assembly that this is going to explode in those numbers. And what does that do to cities and counties? You have to also couple this issue. That's one particular issue. The General Assembly is coming up with the sledgehammer saying, we want to reduce property taxes. And everybody's like, oh, great. And then no one realizes what that means to services, to how you fund your fund balance, what that does for water utilities. So, this is an interesting issue. I don't know personally if they're going to address this issue specifically, because there are decent arguments as to it does keep units affordable. They haven't, the people that do these have not, as far as I know, they haven't presented yet. I don't know if they're going to present, but the law has been the law for at least 25 years. And the things that make people in your seats nervous is the corporate ownership. You have a 0.1% nonprofit ownership, or effectively a for-profit business. How does that impact everybody else? But it's a complicated issue. The General Assembly is not great at solving complicated issues quickly. So I hope that this issue will continue to have some play. We obviously, we're going, if asked what our opinion is, we certainly can provide that. But I do think that as they go further into looking at property tax reduction, things like military, veterans exemptions, further homestead exemptions are going to come forward. The budget office for the city, the counties are going to have to look at that too in whole, because this is just one reduction of property tax revenue. Then these others start coming in. What does that really mean to a city like us that's growing, that has a ton of people here, compared to a Snow Hill in Greene County that's doing the exact opposite? And, you know, a reduction in any property tax for a Greene County or Snow Hill is really remarkably more impactful than it would be in Raleigh. So
You said 1/10 of 1% ownership.
it can be as minimal as it can be. You know, I think they're mostly 1%. But again, it's an intriguing issue for me. Like, I knew nothing about this until this meeting. So, you know, it never came up when I was on the council. And I do feel like, I mean, there are people there that would say, if they were asked to give time, hey, we have 6,000 affordable units still in South Carolina, in North Carolina, because we have this exemption. Now, you know, where the balance is on that with locals, that's a policy decision the state's gonna have to make. Y'all just need to be aware of it, because it is going to continue to erode your ability to collect the taxes that we think we're entitled to. And these are things that we just have to pay attention to.
And Lambert Milton had a question then.
Yeah, I would just be interested to see, I guess, the cost and benefit analysis. And so if this program is keeping affordable units on the market, what would we spend to produce, to create new units at the same affordability? And because people are talking about the tax impact, but then if it's, saving public funds to provide subsidies, I'm just curious how that balances. That would be an interesting analysis.
There were slides, I can go back to my computer and look. I feel like there was a slide that had a comparison of a nonprofit
Yes.
and a for-profit. And, you know, as y'all all know, any renter is gonna pay its share of property. Renters pay property tax just like fee simple owners do. I mean, let's go ahead and knock that out. But that was an interesting slide, and I think it's in the package that was part of that agenda, wasn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so we'll be glad to bring that back. It was not part of the deck that I have today, but happy to bring that back.
So you kind of alluded to my question. So where are the smaller municipalities and the more rural, counties? Are they supportive of this initiative or?
I haven't polled all of them. Most of the folks that I hang out with, both at the association levels of the league, county commission association, and the contract lobbyists for municipalities, are all very fearful of these conversations.
So one of the things about the more rural counties, and you can kind of see it on Catawba, which I know isn't super rural, but you can see that only 40% of the units in Catawba are eligible. So it's really about the area median income of the county. If the area median income of the county is pretty low, you're not going to end up with a lot of units that would be affordable, like we have, which is 94% is considered affordable, because the rent that is considered affordable is $2,100.
But their total tax base is much smaller, so that 40% has a huge.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
Sure.
Councilor Payne.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like there's more to the deck. It might be helpful for us to see some of, maybe you can send that through after the retreat. But I do think it would be helpful, or it sounds necessary for us to do a much deeper dive and analysis on what's the state of play on our affordable housing. And you described on this chart on the right, that this is the total units, whether market rate or subsidized in some way. Couldn't we break this out to how many are for-profit affordable, how many are nonprofit affordable that receive city subsidy? What's the general nonprofit ownership strategy of our trusted partners, the DHIC, whatever, so that I feel like it would be helpful for us to be armed with some proactive suggestions in case the General Assembly would like to consider updating this law in a way that would be supportive of our goals as well.
Councilor Sue.
So I know we're talking about the exempt. I guess I'm curious to know how the non-exempt is going to play out. We often talk about the value of density capturing more of, potential future taxes. So I don't know where they're going, because this leads me to believe that's even to put more pressure on us to look at higher density products because they're not exempt. So I just don't know what they're thinking on the non-exempt side, whether they're going to start to cap property tax, because now it puts more pressure on those higher density, higher value, non-exempt properties, which the community is saying, we're concerned about density, we're concerned about height, but it seems like there's going to be more pressure to look at those non-exempt. So I don't know what the committee's looking at for non-exempt? I know there were some states that just put a cap, and that's it.
California
Cap-
cap. In
Texas, others, I think.
That goes, our cap is $1.50 per $100 per $1,000 evaluation. Which nobody is even close to $1.50. I think the highest in the state is in the 77 to 78%. Again, this is all my memory, which is poor right now. But you know, at the end of the day, affordable means affordable. Okay, that's a policy goal that the city has. That's what y'all want. The General Assembly sees this and they like affordability too, but it can't come at if they're gonna do something crazy on property tax, in addition to this, then that really starts making a lot of pain points for cities and counties. The other thing that I would just
It's
say.
not even a pain point, it's a tsunami of pain.
Well, and the naysayers, and you know, the people that are there, I mean, the first thing they look at, I mean, our slides show the same thing, 40+% goes to public safety. You know, when you start looking at what the things you're gonna cut, you know, it's a pretty stark reality. What I would say to y'all is, as you look through these things, you talk about your budget, all this is meaningful in the context of what else you spend your money on. You know, Marshall and Janet we had the opportunity to present in front of a different body a week earlier. But Asheville, one of my other clients, they got dinged pretty hard. They're coming back in February, and one of their specific questions now is, we read in basically an independent type newspaper in Asheville that you're gonna have a $30 million budget shortfall. Come explain to us why you have $30 million shortfall. Now, you know, there's a storm, there's other things, but there's other things they spend their money on that the General Assembly does not like at all. So I just say this broadly before I go sit back down. This all is meaningful, whether it's affordability of your housing to other things you're spending money. They are 100% looking at what cities and counties are spending money on. And this committee is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, and I think on the other side of that too is to recoup that loss, if it happens, we've got to raise fees and cost for every other thing that we charge for. Because we can't operate at the level that we operate without recovering that revenue. So that's the bad side of the piece of incentivizing affordable housing.
Do they talk in the committee about the number of approvals that we have given, and what's not being built? Because we have, I think we have a number of like 100,000 units that we have approved. So how does that weigh into the conversation, instead of it always being a slap on our wrist to go, but look at what we've tried to do and it's not being built? Do we have that, is that concluded?
No, and look, Raleigh's not the problem in this. That's the good. Hello, great, congratulations. Yeah, that's not a problem on this one. I mean, but look, they do follow the news cycles here. I guarantee you, they know what just happened at your city council meeting this week. I mean, I promise you they know that. So, you know, which side ever you were on that, you know, it's the city is doing the things that the electeds expect cities to do. And Philip Isley's personal opinion, now I know I'm, you know, publicly on saying this out loud, I have thoughts of this committee and the things they're going to accomplish, and I'm happy to share those with y'all at another time. This is we're going through the effort here to just show what the property tax world looks like statewide. Having a fix that is a one size fits all of the state, I think is really difficult. But this is a good lesson for all of the locals. So really look at hard, okay, where are we getting our funding from? What are we spending our funding on? What are the things that matter to our community? And the General Assembly, that's part of that. And I do think a little bit of this could be also looking at people or groups like Asheville, you have this shortfall. Okay, you have a $30 million shortfall. How are you going to make that up? Or why did you get there? You know, and so those are just the ways they're looking at this thing. But Raleigh on this issue is in pretty good shape, I think.
I mean, and I'm really happy about that, but we are at a shortfall of housing units, and it's not for lack of us approving them and wanting them to be built. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know, but I really wanted part of that conversation because it looks like Raleigh is just, oh, we have all these portable units and we're going to have a budget shortfall, but we're not talking about all the things that we approved and how that partnership is supposed to work when an approval comes through. And where I might be missing is why those aren't being billed. So that part of the conversation, I feel doesn't get enough daylight.
All these meetings are, live streamed. And you can go there too. If you want to go, I'll be there, but live stream is usually better.
Thank you.
Councilmember Patton.
Philip, do you think they would, consider just like an alternate tax strategy in general, like a land value tax comes to mind? Like if you have a parking lot that's zoned for 40 stories, you should be taxed like it's a 40-story building. Do you think they would consider that?
They're looking at a host of different ideas. I mean, nationally, and again, there are more slides that I haven't been in memory, but there's a lot of how others do it. California's on there, and that's sort of a not what it is. There's also states that have their own, you don't have to have you don't have to have equal tax rates across the state. I mean, there's things in our constitution, things in our history that are different than these other states that they're comparing to, but there's a ton of ideas. I think in the first meeting where you saw this sort of laundry list of how states and locals do maintain the appropriate funding levels to run their government. I think the answer is yes, they're considering all things.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so we're here. This is the third sort of bucket, if you will, that's impacting our FY26 property tax collections, and these are appeals. So if you look at the left side of the slide, this is really the appeal process. So there's an informal review at the county. There's the Board of Equalization and Review, which is also at Wake County. And then you have the final step, which is the Property Tax Commission, which is at the state level. So there's really sort of those three levels of appeals. What we have currently at the PTC is almost $6 billion that is still wrapped up in appeals. 147 commercial and 210 residential. Now, not all of that is going to go away, right? We know that. The best estimate in working with our colleagues at Wake County is we may be exposed $2+ million. It really all depends on when the Property Tax Commission meets and when those decisions are made. So I'm not anticipating that all of that 2 million will come in 26, but some of it will come in 27. And so that's why we wanted to share it as, again, we're thinking about the FY27 budget process. I will say this is exactly why the Wake County Board voted to change the revaluation and the timing of that process. I think everyone will remember the last revaluation and the sticker shock. And I think what you can see is by all of these appeals still being in play, that really is a result of that huge sticker shock. So the next revaluation actually occurs as a part of the FY28 budget process. And then after that, it will be every 2 years. So just wanted to paint the picture of what's still out there to go that we're tracking.
And that's county-wide. How much of that is?
This is Raleigh.
So all of that is
This
just.
is Raleigh. Wow. So I'm going to shift off property tax and just have a couple of slides here to finish up general fund revenues. So sales tax, I think, is around 20% of our of our general fund budget. There's not a lot of news to share here. This chart goes all the way back to FY19. And what you can really see, the stat colors are just how our sales tax collections come in on a quarterly basis. But what you can really see is the increase in the overall budget during this time frame. So we have the pandemic, lots of spending put into households. We have extremely high inflation during this time as well. So the message for 26 is we're about where we expect to be and previous years as well. So I think we're tracking well. There's a lot of months to go. You will recall we get sales tax information like 3 months in arrears. So it's going to be a while, but just wanted to say right now, I think we're trending pretty well. This is that all other revenue bucket. And the message here is we're really on track as well. We're about at 44% of the budget, which is really about where we were last year. Now, last year we did overachieve our budget, which was a great thing, but you can really just see from the size of the bars that most of that came in the second half of the year. So fingers crossed that still continues, and we'll be having this story at the end of FY 26. So wrapping up on general fund revenues, obviously, we're going to continue to monitor the 26 revenue collections just as we always do. We'll definitely be following the House Select Committee and any recommendations that come out of that. And all of this will be geared to support the 27 budget process, but really wanted to take the time to paint the picture of the challenges that are in front of us as we think about that revenue budget for 27. I will pass it to Sonia now.
Thank you. Great. So obviously Allison focused a lot on where we currently stand as far as our property tax revenue picture is concerned. It's not looking very great. And we are so incredibly early in the budget process. Our departments are still working on their budget. So the information that I'm going to provide you is fluid. It's incredibly preliminary, and I want to focus more on the expense side.
Could we just speak to sales tax? Do you have any sense on how that's tracking? Or did I miss that?
Yeah, sales tax, the message is really, I think, from a first quarter perspective, which is what we have, we're really on track. But the one thing that maybe I didn't allude to on this chart is you can really just see how those bars have started to flatten, right? So actually, if you go back to 19 to the 26 budget, this has increased like $52 million. I mean, it's been a substantial increase as you look backwards, but you can really see those bars in these last couple of years just flatten. You know, I feel like I read a lot of economists, and, you know, spending is just anyone's guess, right? You know, everyone was worried about tariffs, et cetera. But so far, our spending has really held. But certainly, you know, no one has the crystal ball. Councilmember Patton?
Kind of related to that, some of the like sort of macroeconomic charts I've seen are basically saying that like, whilst like spending on total is looking about the same, the split between who is spending is increasing, that like 50% of all the spending is the richest 20% of Americans, and the rest is, so it's like poorer Americans are spending less notably, and richer Americans continue to just kind of like carry the weight of the other spending. Is there a way we index that more locally? Is that like the pattern, is that pattern applying here?
It may be. I mean, we get very little information from the state on sales tax, so I don't really have the ability to dive deep. I mean, to your point, we're certainly looking at what is happening. We have worked with the Department of Revenue to try to give us some early headlights. There's just so many factors, and they collect at the state level, the county, and then the distribution to the city, and they're 3 months in arrears. It's just it is a tough story to sort of project.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So going back, obviously what Allison provided in such great detail to all of us is that property taxes and whatever is happening at the state level is going to have massive implications on our budget as we move forward. And like I said, we are incredibly early in this process. Our departments are still working on their budgets. So the information that I'm going to provide to you is quite preliminary at this point and is fluid. We are still continuing to work with our finance partners, Allison and her team, to continue to finesse the budget as we get more projections for our sales taxes and property taxes. This, outlook will be, revised, and of course, we'll present that to all of you later. So for this conversation, I want to focus mostly on our expenses. So I wanted to share with all of you kind of how our budget has trended. Of course, when we pass a budget, our revenues equal our expenses. This is focused solely on the general fund. So you'll see our budget trending up from fiscal year 2021, and then you will see a drop in 2026. And that's because, if you recall, we have a portion of our property tax revenues that fund our debt finance projects. And we decided to move a portion of that property tax revenue directly to our general debt fund. So that's where you see that dip. This year, we are following a similar pattern where all of our PAYGO, we have our 4 pennies. We have a penny for housing, we have a penny for street resurfacing, parks maintenance, and then of course our other PAYGO projects. Again, we do a pass through the general fund. We want to be a bit more transparent. Well, not that we weren't already, but really this is an accounting change that we're doing. So that's why you see that dip again in the budget. It's a little less than what it was last year because considerably the debt finance projects are a lot more. And remember also that by doing that change in fiscal year 2026, we initiated what we call our steady state model. And Allison will be going into that a little bit. So when we talk about our expenses and when we compare where we, started our base, because we are a base budget organization, how we kind of started 26 and now we're looking into 2027, there is a gap. And I always, every February, start this conversation with a gap in front of all. So our general fund base budget gap at the moment is $18.3 million. And again, I reiterate at the moment because budget is fluid. Departments are still working on their budgets. And this is where we are. So this gap in our expenses is a culmination of where we find ourselves with our salaries, our benefits, as well as our operating expenses. Salaries, there's about $3.2 million included in that gap. What does that entail? Well, if you all recall, we did a classification and compensation study last year, and it was implemented at the end of September. So this 3.2 million is the full implementation of that study starting July 1 of 2027. 2026. West, we're in. So then what are benefits? So just like salaries, we've made concerted efforts, and our benefits as well. That includes, that 5.6 million includes employee health increases. It includes the award for service program, the continuous service award program. It involves educational incentives for our police and fire personnel as well as those post-retirement benefits that Allison will be talking to all of you about. That's our OPEB, that's also our LEOSA, that's also our ELGERS, and my apologies, Councilmember Silver, I know you don't like acronyms without an explanation. So we promise that there's an explanation forthcoming. Also operating expenses. Now that's all the stuff that we need. That's our equipment replacement. That's also utilities. Lots of conversations happening around Duke Energy rate. Those are projected to go up by 4%. So contractual increases, just stuff that we need to do to keep the lights on. So that's what's contributing to this expense budgetary gap. And then if we look a little further, you're going to say, you're starting at this point, what are you doing internally to make sure that we meet, we continue to resolve this budgetary gap? So part of our strategy for the upcoming budget process has been to have departments look at their revenues. And that's not every department has revenues, obviously. So that's mostly focused on our Parks and Recreation Department, and Transportation and others. And then, of course, we are asking them to look at their revenues in totality and saying, do we provide a service that, obviously has an administrative cost, personnel costs that we could potentially charge for. And of course, that's something that we've kind of thrown to departments to look at. Something else that we've asked departments to do is to identify process improvements and efficiencies within their line item budgets to say, is it something that we can continue to accomplish and provide for our residents without necessarily asking or requesting for as part of the upcoming budget process? So really trying to identify where we can reallocate our budgets to continue to provide existing levels of service. And then, of course, we asked for departments to provide us with reductions this year. So we have asked for cuts as part of the budget process as well. That is every general fund departments in the city, including myself. So those are all of the approaches that we are taking to ensure that as we work with finance, we refine our revenues. We also are able to refine our expenses to meet the challenge of that $18.3 million gap. So looking forward, we also have some budgetary pressures. Now, these are the ones that we know about at the moment, right? The city has made a concerted effort to ensure that as we continue to grow, we continue to provide world-class services. So obviously there are some pressures that we face as an organization as we, not only looking to current service levels, but what geographic growth in our city is going, what impact that's going to have into future service levels. So we have invested in a fire master plan that was presented to all of you last year. We are currently in the midst of a targeted staffing study that encompasses about 8 departments citywide. So just really trying to understand what those potential future implications are going to be. And a lot of these budgetary pressures not only have operating budget implications, but they also have capital budget implications. So let me take you step by step. So targeted staffing study, we are in the middle of that right now. Matrix Consulting Group is the firm that we have hired to help us with this targeted staffing study. They will be coming and speaking to you about the results of this study next month in February. But really, we don't know what that's going to cost us. So you'll see a range between $5 to $10 million. Of course, we're talking police, we're talking building safety, we're talking code enforcement. So several departments in the study. So of course, what is that going to entail? What operational improvements will we need? Then you obviously know of our fire master plan that was presented to all of you in April of last year. Again, the fire master plan provided, yes, sir.
Just explain, I know we went through a different study for salaries for the first one. Can you talk about, is this about how many employees we need? I just want to know how this one is
Yes.
different than the one that occurred last
Absolutely.
year.
So Councilmember Silver, thank you for the question. So the classification and compensation study really looked at our salary levels across the gamut, across the city, really aligning them, benchmarking them with where our peers are. This, on the other hand, really looks at those workload measures. How many people does the city need in comparison to geographic growth that, you know, the city is experiencing and kind of where which the directions that we're heading? Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
yes.
Okay. So coming back to the fire master plan, again, you'll see a range of $5 to $10 million. Now, the fire master plan addresses staffing gaps. And of course, this was a plan that has short-term, midterm, and long-term goals for the city of Raleigh from 2025 to 2050. And of course, there is a lot of operating and capital budgetary implications here. So that is not only to address people like the target staffing study does, but this is also firefighters, this is equipment, ladder trucks, other apparatus, engines, and then of course, station modernizations, new stations. So again, not just a general fund implication, but Allison will talk further about how this is also going to impact our steady and our capital budget as well in the future. And then we have employee salary increases, which is that third budgetary pressure that we have. So in prior years, you have all approved, you all approved fantastic increases for our employees as part of the classification and compensation study last year. But generally, this city has always approved increases in the amount of 3 to 3.5% for exempt employees and 5% for public safety and non-exempt employees. So I have a range here, which is that 1 to 3% range of increases so that you understand and you see that a 1% increase in the salary in the general fund can be about $2.1 million. So at 3%, we're looking at $6.3 million. So that's the range we're looking at. So these are some of the pressures. Now there are others that we know of. And we talked to all of you about parking a couple of months ago. We know that parking revenues have not been, kind of meeting, our expenses continue to outpace our parking fund revenues there. So that definitely, has led to some maintenance concerns that we need to address. IT, again, we need to continue to protect our digital assets. So working with our IT departments, we've identified some of the pressures that we have to tend to in the upcoming budget in terms of IT. And then of course, Dick's Park. Gibson Floyd Plaza has been fantastic for the city. I'm always amazed when Stephen mentions how much, visitation has increased in the park. And then of course, so not only meeting those programmatic needs, but also now that the DHHS has left the campus, what are those maintenance and other needs going to be for the city that we are responsible for? So those are some budgetary pressures that we have. Now, at the start of this conversation, I said that we are at the start of a budget process. So those are the pressures that I know of. Departments provide us with our budgets, with what their budget asks later this month and early into next month. So what is it that I don't know yet? So that's the unknowns is something to consider. So now I'm going to try to kind of visualize this for all of you. Whatever I've said, I've tried to visualize in this chart. So let's just focus on the left side of this chart. So you'll see our starting base budget. We're about, like I said, our expense budget, we're looking at about an $18.3 million gap. Now, I am confident, because I can't be anything but confident at this point, because we always figure it out, that I'm working with Marshall and working with our lovely CFO and in working with all of our departments who are looking at their revenues, who are looking at their line item budgets, who are looking at those and probably providing us with those reductions, that we'll be able to cover that gap. So that's that green triangle that you see over there. So essentially, I'm at a negative $18.3 million. Now I've covered that $18.3 million, let's say, as I start my budget, or I'm in the middle of my budget. So now I'm starting at that zero. So now we started that line. So now I'm trying to show you, well, it doesn't end there, right? Whatever I've identified is still going to need, we'll need to figure out how to pay for that. So there's a targeted staffing study, and you can see, this doesn't have a pointer, I think, but I tried to show what the implications will be for a 5 to 10% gap. Then let's go to that other study. Red line. Is there a dot in here? Oh, yeah. Where is it?
You're making it
in mine right now. Did I say we want to have some fun?
I don't want to talk about budget at 8 AM in the morning. I certainly don't.
It's all good.
All right, so here we go. Here's the pointer. And I don't have it on, otherwise I wouldn't know what I'm doing. So here we go, $5 to $10 million gap right here. Then let's look at this, I talked about parking. That's another $3 million data point right here. Then look at our salary increases. That's a $2.1 to $6.3 million data point right there. Then let's go to our fire master plan, another $5 to $10 million there. Then let's talk about Dix Park right here. Then let's talk about our IT needs. So this keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. And then I've identified $5 million as those unknowns, which seems like a really itty bitty number because at the beginning of the budget process, I get like 5 multiplied by 6. That's kind of the amount of requests that we get from departments. And those are just the stuff that they need and they've been putting off. And here's, I've written to all of you what was Senate for property taxes moving into fiscal year 2027. So you can just imagine that if we started, okay, here we go, point. Even if we started at 5 million here and added the 3, I mean, we're looking at anywhere between, if we did everything at the minimum of these ranges, between 24.5 million, and we did everything at the high end of these ranges to about $38.5 million in increases that we have to fund. That frankly, at this point is looking a little scary. So with that doom and gloom, not really happy news this morning, unfortunately. But I believe this is the last expense budget slide, and then I'm gonna pass it on to Allison to talk about it. Yes, sir.
So I know we talked about this some years ago, and I just want to kind of just put it back out there and probably would definitely need the help of DRA. Looking at our parking decks, and is it time to offload ownership of some of our parking decks?
So we do have an agenda item around that very topic that kind of talks about our ownership, what that will look like, and it refreshes the study that was done a few years ago. So,
Okay.
yes.
Well, and then I guess, and Councilor Cotton's got her hand up, but with Dix Park, there's also the consideration of, do you take a parcel, right, of land that has already been redeveloped, demolish it and try to build one building that then generates operating income for the park? And if you're going to do that, I mean, at some point, figure out when you start that, because that's not a short process.
And then, not necessarily for you all specifically, but, related to the fire master plan, like we've invested all this money and time and understanding our needs. But our partners at the county are changing some of their models, which are not inextricable from our fire needs. And so it may be appropriate to find a way to quantify and value how any of their changes impact our operations as well.
Well, and then finally too, I mean, I know we have not socialized this much at all, but there is Mecklenburg just passed a 1 penny for transportation. If the counties, there's been some discussion, right, of should we consider this in Wake County and beyond?
Yes.
I think also understanding if we were to get General Assembly approval to do something like that, how would that impact our transportation budgets? Is that all over and above, or would that in any way, potentially save certain dollars from these budgets?
I think it would save certain dollars from these budgets. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just putting all the different ways we can remediate some of those things that you just posted.
Absolutely. But then again, that is going to take some time, but yes, for sure, as we look into the future, definitely.
Yes, all right, so general governmental debt. You've seen this slide before, just want to touch on it quickly, for at least the general government side of the house. We issue either general obligation bonds, we call GEO bonds, or we issue limited obligation bonds or LOBs. It really, for the GEO, we have successfully done that on the transportation, parks and housing. I think you're very familiar with that. And our limited obligation bonds, we primarily use for city and public safety facilities. In fact, just earlier this week, on the council agenda, we approved limited obligation bonds for City Hall and some public safety facilities. You approve all of this as well as the local government commission. So very transparent in the bond process. We also issue revenue bonds. Not going to talk about those today. Those primarily support our Raleigh water enterprise and will be supporting our stormwater enterprise shortly here in the future. But today we're going to focus on GEO and LOBs. You've seen this slide before as well at your fall retreat. It's expanded a little bit because we actually were able to now get the official timeline from the Board of Elections. So really want to focus what's sort of circled there in red. So with any GEO referendum, the council has 4 votes that need to occur. The first vote really states the purpose and amount. You can do that at an April or a May meeting. The second vote then really is more of a formality around the resolution of the bond order. Some sworn statements will indicate how much it's going to cost, and you call for the public hearing. You can do that at a May or a June meeting. The third vote is you hold the public hearing and then decide to move forward, and you adopt formally the purpose, amount, and you essentially call for the referendum. Which occurs on November 3rd of this year. And then we come back for the final vote, which really is to declare the results. And we typically do that in December. I think to allow you the most flexibility, it would certainly be preferred to choose April, May, and June, understanding that you only have that one meeting in July. So I think the preference, would be the top line there, but understand that these are big decisions. So we talked a lot about steady state at your fall retreat. Just a kind of a friendly reminder. This is with no tax increase. You might remember the number was 200 million. It's now 203. So it's actually gotten a little bit better as we closed out last year. The idea, and we'll talk about it on the next chart, is that would be every 4 years. And it would need to be the voted debt and the city infrastructure debt. I wanted to highlight specifically the city projects that are currently funded that is not within this capacity number. That's our City Hall, heavy equipment shop, Fire Station 1, 3, and 15, and police evidence building. So I wanted to be very clear on that because as Sadia just talked about, we have this huge fire master plan. None of that is currently budgeted and would need to come out of that 203. You've seen this chart before. It might look slightly different, but just again, wanted to remind everyone. So the calendar years are up top. Asterisk denotes when the referendum years are. Corresponding fiscal years, that new steady state number of 203 million would be available every 4 years. The spending would then take place over the next 4 years. We'd have 203 again, spend for 4 years, 203 again. So just wanted to highlight again for everyone, that's how that works. Again, the 203 would need to support all 4 of these buckets: housing, transportation, parks, and limited obligation.
So does it have to be spent in that 4 years, or it can roll over if it goes through with planning, procurement, design, and then construction? How does that increment work? Does it have to be spent, or it rolls over for the next cycle of the 203?
Yeah, great question. It can certainly roll over. I think our objective with steady state is to actually get all that spending done, the projects open, on the ground, et cetera. Because it poses a difficulty to ask voters again if those projects aren't done. So the real objective behind steady state is to make sure that we are poised to spend that money, but it doesn't go away. And we know it's probably not perfect, yes.
So if we wanted to run a general obligation bond without a tax increase, we would need to know the number of city infrastructure projects, or at least the amount prior to going into these early general obligation bond votes. And so like how far in advance are we planning the city infrastructure projects? And then when will we know that figure for each, I guess, of the bond years?
So I'll take that one and good discussion, which is exactly why we're here. So we are talking about this staffing study, which is primarily focused on public safety, police and ECC. And we are focused on the fire master plan as items that we're pretty confident that we do need to make investments in. If we're able to take care of those investments in this upcoming budget, then we can set ourselves up in a situation where you have a tax rate set. When the voters go in November, if you left it at that 203 million, they would be voting knowing that if approved, it doesn't increase the tax rate the following year. So it is possible based on how we handle this year's budget to set it up that way. Other city, obviously, but been involved in both. It's obviously a much easier process when it's not tied to a property tax increase.
Yeah, I think a great benefit of steady state is being able to explain to the residents that this bond will not be a self-tax. But I don't want that to not be the case if we are promising a certain amount for, I don't know, housing, and then the city infrastructure ends up taking some of the debt capacity, and then it ends up being a tax rate increase. I just don't think that's a very transparent way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, once you lock in, Allison showed the calendar, once you lock in on a number for a housing bond and or a transportation bond in May, that's the number. It cannot change after that point.
We have to make money up some other way for some of the other projects.
So the city infrastructure projects would really back into the debt capacity.
And actually, that's a great segue into the next chart, because I did want to highlight, there are lots of sort of ways to put the puzzle together. And I think you brought that up. One consideration is you use the steady state really solely for geo. And then you create either one-time lobs or a steady state lobs bucket that would flow out into the future as well. Now that comes with a property tax increase, because if you wanted to keep the 203, right, for purposes of geo. So over on the slide on the right-hand side there, you can see, so a half a penny would generate one-time $72 million of debt capacity that you could use for city infrastructure. You also could take that half penny and utilize it more in a steady state scenario, and you would have 48 million. Those would both be or the 48 million would be incremental to the 203. A penny gets you 142 million, or an additional 93 million. And I ran a 1.5 penny scenario, which is 211 and 136. So I do think, as Ryan just talked about, you know, there's a lot of ways that the council can look at these options. Again, this one would come with a tax increase to potentially address those city infrastructure needs. Also too, back on this slide, you know, we really run these every 4 years based on your feedback. You know, there is opportunities to do 2 years instead of 4. And so we could certainly look at how all those numbers begin to move. So I think my real message is, keep going the wrong way. My real message is there is some options as we get a further understanding of those capital needs on how to move forward.
Does it clarify the 203 million that I heard was that would not increase taxes?
That's correct. So back
And
here,
so the pennies that you're putting here is if we want to go above.
correct. Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, so that is steady state and general debt. I'm going to move on to long-term liabilities. We don't talk about long-term liabilities. We focus a lot on operations, and so I do feel like it's important in my role to spend a few minutes on long-term liabilities. So when I talk about long-term liabilities, this is really our future promise to pay, right? And the bulk by far is debt. 1.7 billion, and this is citywide, not just general fund. And, but there is 22% of the long-term liabilities that are dedicated to benefits. And when you break out that 22%, there's really 3 buckets of benefits. And this is where we'll explain those. So we have the local government pension. I think many of you are familiar with that. We have a law enforcement officer separation allowance. I know we've talked a lot about that. And then we also have what we call OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. And the majority of this bucket is around retiree health care. So that is how that splits out from a benefits perspective.
And I'm just curious, I was on a call yesterday with New York City who was talking about Mamdani and how they're thinking about potentially changing some of their pension payments because they have it in the city. I mean, they can make that decision. But I'm just curious, does the General Assembly have any thought to change anything on pensions that would change what we're putting in? And this may be a Philip Isley question, and I'm not supporting that change, but just curious when you sit there and look at New York City and Philadelphia and some of these other big cities that play around with it, whether the General Assembly gets tempted.
Yeah, I'll defer to Philip because I think, yeah, this sets up this slide very, very well of what we are contributing.
So quickly, I would just say, there are bills filed every year that deal with pension all over the state. Typically, what you see mostly is the tension between what the LEO contribution is, the special separation allowance for the police department versus fire department. That's the annually filed bill. It's always a fight in the General Assembly. Those are typically the only things that deal with pension on a regular basis. I don't think anybody is looking at reducing anything at the moment. The treasurer certainly is not looking at it. He's looking to have savings elsewhere, other places, or increase their return on some of the assets that the state has. But it's something we follow all the time.
The trend over the last 10 years has been to reduce the assumption on how much investment income we'll get every year.
Yeah.
I think it used to be 7.5. I think they're 6.5 now. Yeah, obviously. You would know better than me. So I mean, that anytime you do that, it obviously makes the payment that the local government has to make even higher to support the same level of benefits.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So on that point, again, just to bring it home to the operational side, you know, in FY 26, the contributions, and again, this is citywide, was $90 million for these 3 benefits. And you've seen a 58% increase over the last 5 years. So this is a big player in your operational budgets. Now, to say that, to your point, Mayor, we have the local government retirement system in green here, and we have the law enforcement officer separation. These are required by state statute. We don't have a choice. We get told essentially, you know, what we're required to do, and we do it. The only option here in the benefits bucket that is at the city council purview is our OPEB. And again, that covers retiree dependent healthcare. There's also a Medicare supplement of $100, and it covers a small portion of life insurance. But the biggest piece here we're talking about is retiree healthcare. So what have we seen other local governments do? We have absolutely seen other local governments close their retiree healthcare plans for new hires. A closed plan would not impact current employees. They would essentially have that grandfather clause. What does it do? It significantly reduces your ongoing operational costs. It enables us to have cost containment for our growing liability, which is $210 million. And again, it aligns with many peers here in North Carolina, and private sector companies here in Raleigh don't have this type of benefit. So these are the benchmark entities that have closed their plan on the left, and those that remain open. So the bolded are our Big 10 peers. So 60% of our Big 10 peers have closed their plans. Those years are when they elected to close the plan. Some other local Apex, Holly Springs, Wake Forest, and we all know the state of North Carolina closed their plan in 2021, and this is to new hires. Yes.
So, and just to be clear, so I know the state of North, it used to be after 5 years of employment, you got free entire, retiree health care for the state. And then they went to a 5, you sort of ratcheted up your benefit over 5, 10, 15, 20. So I'm just curious, when you say it's open, these could be all over the map in terms of earning that benefit.
And they are.
And what is Raleigh's?
So Raleigh's, and we can certainly come back at another workshop to explain it a little bit more, but we did make an adjustment in 2008 where, to your point earlier, it was sort of once you're in, you're in. Then we did make some changes, and I don't really know those off the top of my head, around percentages and essentially when you vest.
Okay.
And so to your exact point, Mayor, I don't have all the plan specifics, but I do know that many have taken steps to sort of ratchet that threshold down. Again, for future hires, not current employees. So that's certainly something that we can dig in more with Charnel Jones, our HR director.
Yeah, as a state employee, that's why I can never leave, because I started before 2021. But if we do want to talk about this issue ongoing, I really think we need to look at the Affordable Care Act and what's going on the federal side, because the folks that are most, I think, impacted right now with the doubling of those premiums are folks that are like before they get to 65, right? Maybe 55 to 65. They have the highest premiums. They're struggling to pay the costs. And so if we want to do this cost savings in a time when the federal government is providing so much less, I find that concerning. So I want to just think about, what other options are there out there for folks? And if there aren't, then, yeah.
Sure. And this is certainly a dynamic, environment as we certainly know. So thank you for that comment.
I'm assuming since you're bringing this up, we're a version of the open plan.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I should have listed
Okay.
Raleigh there.
Yeah, I figured if you brought it up, that means we're on the open
Yes,
side.
yes, thank you.
Closed.
Yeah.
It'd be a closed conversation. Okay.
So again, I just bring this up for consideration to make you aware. We did ask our actuary to run a scenario of what a closed plan, potentially, again, closed to new hires would look like. So the blue line there is essentially the projection of the city side for the retirement. So it is going to continue to go up. If you were to close a plan to new hires, that is the orange line. And what you see is it goes down over time. One of the main reasons for that is we would essentially reset the amortization period because we now have a date certain in the future where that last person, right, will get the benefit. Today, by opening, our liability is going to continue to go up and our contributions are going to go up. So that is one of the biggest flips, if you will, is the plan would be reset, which then treats it more like a mortgage because you have that final payment date, albeit way out in the future. And the actuary was able to say over a 5-year period, that would reduce contributions by about 6.6 million, 10 years by about 31 million, and then over a 15-year period, 79 million. So substantial operational reductions, which would be essentially, again, a decision for the council. Yes. Councilmember Branch.
What if we pushed out the years required to receive the benefit?
Yeah, but then we'd be happy to run a lot of those scenarios. We did not do that. And certainly again, in working with HR, we could look at that.
And I only ask that because I'm thinking you still have something that someone could go for. And normally when someone gets to 10 or 15, they're not really trying to leave. At the 5-year mark, they have the benefit and they could possibly leave. But
Sure.
if you push it out, that may help with other retention. If you have that issue in other departments.
Yeah, we can bring that data back at the February 16th budget work session where we talked about all things HR and cost. But I meant to look at those savings over those period of years to really think about that it doesn't impact anybody that's currently within the organization is the tough choice or the tough discussion that we have to consider. And really, quite frankly, looking at all the projections on the insurance side for the next couple of years, I don't know how we can continue to afford it. It's gonna be a trade-off salary versus benefits. And that's never a good conversation for employees either. But yeah, lots to consider.
Well, and just to add on, I appreciate you've brought us one possibility that really affects people that aren't yet employed here.
Right.
But there are also, I mean, and I think just benchmarking our health plan against other health plans, I think we do have a very, to our credit, very generous health plan. And I'm not suggesting, but I do think it's helpful for us to understand, are there other benefits or, you know, just benchmark what other possibilities are there, whether we ever choose to pursue those, but just to understand more options than just this one lever. Counselor Pat.
And I guess tell the story I'm taking from this and tell me if this is accurate. So you're saying in 5 years, if we did this, in 5 years, our projected savings would be $6.6 million, which tells me a story that we are having a lot of people seek employment with us in their final 5 years of their career before going to retirement. Is that an accurate?
I don't think so. I think all we were looking at is.
We have the HR director too.
Okay.
And apologies, I know we asked for a little heat, we might have went a little talking. And also, council, if you all can speak up here in just a little bit, but then not able to hear you all. So, Ms. Jones, you can move closer.
So I just want to say that our current process as it relates to the retirement healthcare, it was prorated in 2008. So just because you have 5 years does not mean that you're getting the full insurance. You're getting a percentage that you're having to pay. So that's what it means by that open plan. So it depends on the number of years that you have with the city in regards to how much you pay for that particular insurance. But I can bring that back at the work session. There are other options to explore, as you mentioned, with the plans. So there was a decision to kind of change this. There are health HSAs that we could possibly look at. But I can bring.
Health savings accounts.
I'm sorry.
He knows that.
I'm so sorry.
He's retired, you know that.
But that is an option that I can bring back. And you'll kind of see some of that with the multi-year strategy as well, benefit.
And just to be clear, this is not something that we're recommending at this point. This is the only lever we control about those other post-employment benefits. So as the people that live in the city are seeing, like the private sector consistently eliminating this benefit, we would never look at changes for existing employees on this. But when we're talking about a benefit for new employees that in most cases would be payable in 2050s and 2060s, we thought it's something that we wanted to at least put on the table for you guys to consider.
And as we continue to grow our workforce, that continues to be a higher liability on the books. And so when we had the conversations a couple years ago, for the past couple of years, about additional benefits for certain classes of employees, those will continue to be increases in liabilities on the books that we have no say-so about. We have to budget that money regardless of whether we have it or not, or whether we want to or not. Once it's that liability, we have to carry that forward on our books. For accounting purposes, when we're going out to the market for debt, when we're issuing bonds and all of that. And it does have implications on the rates that we get when we borrow money.
All right, so I think, obviously there's been a lot of discussion recently on internal controls. And so I'm just going to take a quick minute. This is not going to be an in-depth conversation, specifically around city spending for procurement, mostly procurement contracts, procurement cards, and travel.
So Allison, if I can stop you one
Yes.
second, this is for you, Jane and Megan, in light of the situation that's happening here in Wake County around how there are non-internal controls, how there's not accountability. We're going to show you about how many controls we do have here in the city of Raleigh that would prevent certain types of activities from happening.
Yeah, so happy to do that. Thank you. So on the left side here, this is really around our purchase order and contracts. So there are a lot of approval processes that we have in place. So it's at the department level. There's technical review by IT for technology, our risk management group reviews, procurement reviews, our city attorney office reviews, obviously to form, if you will, Anything above $50,000 goes into the city manager's office for review. And council, you're very familiar with seeing on the council agenda, contracts 300,000 and greater for services and 500 for construction. We also have a pretty intense three-way match process. And essentially what that does is it ensures that the invoice has a PO or a contract, and someone in the department who is responsible for that good or service does a receipt, meaning they verify that the city received those goods or services. So again, a lot of eyes on our contract and PO processes. So P cards, we do have a number of P cards throughout the city. It is an efficient way to get business done. Everyone who touches the process has to go through a training. We must attach a receipt in the system. So the system actually says, oh, no receipt, we're not going to move this forward. And the approvals occur in the department by the supervisor, who arguably has the most knowledge of why that purchase was made. And each department has what we call a departmental administrator that sort of comes behind and makes sure the account's correct, there's budget, all of those real important things. So that's on the P card side. I do know that our city manager and none of our ACMs have procurement cards. So I wanted to sort of say that out loud.
We don't want.
I don't have one either. And so, yes, Councilmembers.
And if I recall, when I was plan director, that there is a line item in each department budget for training and travel. That is still the case?
Yes.
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 And so on travel, exactly to your point, before the travel even occurs, there's what's called a travel authorization, or a TA, we call it for short. Again, that's before the travel, that's ensuring there is budget in place. And the department is approving that to ensure that that business travel is needed. Then you come back from your trip, you have an expense report. Again, department approval, and accounts payable is approving it to our travel policy. So just want to stress that there are a lot of eyes on this. This was really targeted more to the approval process. We obviously have internal audit, we have external audits, we have grant compliance. So there's other areas that I really wasn't going to focus on here. Happy to take any questions, because that's the end of my presentation before I turn it back to someone. Councilman Harrison.
Yeah, so just to clarify, for 50K and above, under 300K, it would come from the department, and then
To the city manager's office.
then the city manager's office. And the city manager's office, does an ACM have to review, or what is the steps there?
That is generally,
Yes.
speak for the office, but yes, generally it's the ACM who is within your portfolio. Because again, arguably, they know why those goods and services are needed.
And then the city manager after that, or just the ACM?
Not necessarily, it just depends upon the department. Obviously, if it's the police department, I would approve it. If it's IT, Ron would approve it, after it's made its way through all those steps.
Thank you.
So really the most important message here is there is a lot of eyes.
A lot.
So sometimes people will get frustrated because the process takes a while. This is one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
So one question I have just about internal audit and how the internal auditor, who should be separate and apart, right? Or she or he, I don't even think he, it's a very important person in city government. So I'm glad we have a strong internal audit department, but I wanted to ask ACM Bergman. I know Charlotte does it a little different. I mean, to me, to the extent that we can highlight that internal auditor, honor the work that they're doing, air it to the city council, to the public, so that they fully have transparency. Where are we investigating? What are our findings, and how are we improving our city?
Yeah, so the way Charlotte does it is they will bring the internal auditor in annually to talk to a committee about a work plan. They don't typically present the audits themselves to that committee. I don't think I remember any time where that occurred while I was there. So, I mean, that's certainly something we can talk about to elevate the work that office is working on, to bring them in front of council, to talk about here's the items that we plan on focusing on this year, and maybe even get some input from you all on different directions you'd like that to go.
Currently, our internal audit office kind of looks at workflows and processes kind of making sure that we're being efficient, where there might be some vulnerabilities, where there may be some gaps. It's not really necessarily associated with the monetary component of how we do business. It is really an inward looking goal or focus of how we can do process improvements to make things work and run better.
All right, so with
And I
that,
think we also had.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So some of the conversation we've been hearing in the news is around, luxurious travel. And so what are the guardrails in the travel column that just ensure, people are traveling in a safe and appropriate, clean accommodations, but not perhaps a luxury stay?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I believe our policy directly says like, you're not flying first class.
Yes.
A lot of our travel specifically is in support of conferences. So most of those, for anyone that's been in the room, will have 4 or 5 conference hotels. We encourage you to do that. We pay on a flat per diem rate. So we're not paying actuals, right? So if the per diem is $10 and you spend 15, you owe the 5. And so I think some of those are the guardrails, but again, it really is at the department level to ensure that employees understand the policy, the travel is necessary, and they're the ones reviewing that. That's a number.
Yeah, so we talked about the internal auditor, and then is there also an external audit?
Yes.
Yeah, we can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have on an annual basis, we're required by state statute to have an annual audit in order to issue any debt. Cherry Becker is our external auditor. Now they are not really into the bowels of the system, right? They are really looking at things from a materiality perspective. Are our financial statements materially presented? And then we also have a number of grants that get audited as well. Now, those are very unique, very detailed. From the grantor will come in and manage that process. So a lot of folks, right, are essentially looking at programs and ensuring that we're spending accordingly.
And I think one of the other things, and not to take us down a rabbit hole, but one of the other steps of accountability that's built into the city of Raleigh, and I've never seen it anywhere else. And it can be frustrating at times, but in situations like now, it kind of makes sense that we say we're better than most. But like if there's a position, a department head, or even I don't have the ability to take a position, upgrade it to what we would want it to be so that we could put somebody in an executive role or pay way more than what the current classification would. Anything beyond 4 steps or 4 grades comes to council on a council agenda. I've never seen that in 30-something years anywhere else to that extent. And everybody around here who are professional public administrators will agree, but that's one of the other steps that we have from an employee perspective that provides another level, or safeguard of security, that we're not just haphazardly applying pay and putting people in places without council's approval. So, although it can take some time and it's frustrating for department heads at times, it is another layer of protection that we have here in the city. And we check and double check everything. We don't acquire property without getting council approval. So as some of this stuff uncovered over the last several months, all of us in my office and our leadership team sitting around the table thinking, how on earth did that happen? We can get a sliver of an alley. We put it on the agenda for you all and you talk about it for 30 minutes. So how are you spending millions of dollars on property without council's say so? It's just unbelievable to me. But trust and believe the city of Raleigh has all kinds of safeguards in place to prevent gross negligence on behalf of staff.
Absolutely. And one thing to add to that is, we also have an approval process for all of our time cards, et cetera. And you mentioned payroll, that's a huge expense. So lots of controls.
Thanks, Allison. So I'm just going to quickly wrap us up. We have received one budget note as part of the budget process so far, and that is to bring back funding recommendations for the design and construction of the band stage at City Plaza, as well as a permanent art installation. So we will be bringing that back to all of you as part of the budget process. We've talked a lot about budget work sessions. Let's do a deep dive on what those topics are going to be and those dates are going to be. Remember, budget work sessions are on Mondays from 4 to 6 p.m. In February, we're going to bring you the engagement overview. Our HR director will be back talking about compensation and benefits along with some of the other items that you highlighted this morning. And then our consultants, Matrix Consulting Group will be there to talk about the results of the targeted staffing study. In March, on March 9th, again, Monday from 4 to 6 p.m., our enterprise departments will present to all of you, that's our Raleigh water, stormwater, solid waste services, and parking as well this year. And then just like we do every year on April 6th, we'll be talking about our annual grants, our 3 grants programs, arts, human services, as well as CDBG on the housing side. And then, of course, our annual budget for fiscal year 27 and our 5-year CIP. So just our last slide here is just to kind of apprise you all of our key dates. So I just mentioned those big budget work sessions. The manager will propose her budget on May 19th. And then our first public hearing for the budget, one and only, is scheduled for June the 10th, June the 2nd. We then in June start what we call council budget work sessions. So those commence on June the 1st, June the 8th, June the 15th, and again, these are Mondays. You also can adopt the budget on the 15th, which is a Monday, or the 16th, where you already have a regularly scheduled Tuesday city council meeting. And then, of course, last but not least, the last date to adopt the budget is June. Right? Yes.
Yeah. I thought June 8th, as soon as, after the public session, the next available work session, we're available to adopt the budget.
You can adopt it earliest
Okay.
on June the 8th, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
you said 15th.
Oh, I apologize.
We approve of that.
Great, so we've gone through.
When will we get, I know you did a series of budget work sessions
Yes.
with the public last fall, right?
Yes,
When will we see the results of that feedback?
that is on February the 16th, where we talk about the engagement overview.
Okay.
So we will be bringing that back for you, what, all that feedback that we heard from our residents. And Mayor, this year, we also did a survey. So we will be talking about the results of the survey as well. Yes, lots of fun things to talk about as budget unfolds. Right, so we, if there are no questions, thank you so much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Michelle, I'm gonna hand this over to you. Thank you.
My face. Right, while Maya transitions over, we're gonna bring up our transportation director, Paul Callum, as well as his assistant director, Kenneth Ritchie. We also have Byron Sanders, the engineering service director, as well as seated next to our city manager, we have ACM Michael Moore available for questions.
Oh.
You all had a lot of meetings. So. And then you back in this.
You said one.
Go ahead.
All right, good morning.
So,
Morning. Morning. Bring a little more energy to this next conversation. I'll say it again. Good morning.
It's been hard.
Like to hear. So, Paul Callum, the train station director here with the city of Raleigh. So I think a great kind of segue on a lot of the questions and conversation I heard with the last slide here, kind of talking about steady state, 203 million. I'll kind of touch on some of those things as we roll into this conversation here. So I've got my colleague here, Byron Sanders here, the engineering services director. A lot of transitions happen between transportation and engineering services department. And then I've got my sidekick over here, the assistant transportation director, Kenneth Ritchie, kind of keep me honest, in case y'all want to go down a rabbit hole just on a couple of details. So he's got some notes over there. So I'll kind of push forward. All right, so the agenda here, talk a little bit of background. We'll touch on some lessons learned from the previous bond back in 2017. Be looking ahead to Councilmember Lambert Melton's conversation and question about, hey, what does this kind of look like going forward? We've got kind of a look ahead on what we're thinking in the transportation world as far as bond considerations. And then we'll talk a little bit about advanced planning considerations. So to touch on here, just about kind of broad world how projects start. So over here on your far left, you'll see kind of project origins. They start anywhere from the comprehensive plan, working with Pat's team with area corridor studies. And then, of course, anything that comes in from the residential or council members' requests. So that's kind of how some of those start. Then in the middle here, you kind of see how some of these projects basically rack and stack, as I call, as far as from a scoring standpoint, safety, transit, bike and ped, congestion, economic development. And then over here to your right, we finally get into the review process of going through the annual CIP and budget process. So kind of high level here on how projects start to the left and kind of how they get to the funding component. Quick snapshot here, just about how the projects are funded, kind of a breakdown. So bonds are about 61%. They're kind of the purple. Your pay-go is roughly about 25%. And then grants are around about 14%. So again, just kind of general overview of how these projects are funded.
Is that pay-go? It seems kind of high. Is that typical, or how do we decide to go into debt versus pay-go?
I think that's typical. I might lean on Allison if she not in, is that, I think that's typical. I think at least what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look at projects, look at the life of projects, and, you know, make that determination. I think, from a pay-go perspective, I believe, and I'll look to Kenneth and others, a lot of those can be some of the smaller projects that happen around the city as well. But that is something we look at pretty regularly as a part of the budget process, but we don't have a hard formula that makes that determination.
They can fluctuate some. All right, so, I want to kind of look back at 2017. I don't want to dwell on this, okay? Because really my goal is to bring energy and kind of excitement and kind of where we need to be going, looking for the next bond consideration. But lessons learned that we gained from the 2017 bond. So time is money. Y'all have probably heard that at some point. We have to make decisions y'all have to make decisions as elected bodies here. Because time does become money, as you've seen some of our projects, which construction costs and things of that nature, real estate costs, they just typically are going to increase over time. So, risk reduction. So we've got to look at where we can mitigate some of those risks, and we'll kind of go in a little bit more detail on that. Again, talking about some advanced planning and things of that nature, early acquisitions on some real estate. Again, trying to take some baby steps in some of these buckets here to kind of keep projects moving along. Effective engagement, we want to continue to do that. We continue to work with our communication department. Byron's got a whole community engagement group in his department as well as ours. So collectively, we want to continue to look at what are the best ways to get the message out, get communication in back from our residents out here on what they'd like to see. So we continue to want to refine that and massage that. And then looking at alternative deliveries. What are other ways that frankly we can deliver products, not just looking at in-house staff and things of that nature, you know, maybe leaning on our consultants and things. So that's kind of just lessons learned, frankly, in my time here at the city that I think we kind of need to look at differently, kind of going forward when we're thinking about a future bond.
Yeah, I know you don't want to dwell on this, but I think it would be helpful. I don't know if you're thinking this way of kind of having that timeline of the design, procurement, and construction. The design phase is one that can typically get in control. That is public engagement. There's a lot that goes on. Not that it's not important, but I think having certain bites at the apple versus having this cycle and loop. And then even for council, when decision points need to happen, so the time and money factor doesn't start to increase. Because, you know, I mean, I don't want to put it bluntly, but each public meeting can cost a project another $600,000 if it's a large project. So I think it'd be helpful to have a timeline and not to adhere to it means that there's a cost implication. We need to communicate that to the public. We want to hear from you, but there's a cost to when you start extending, you know, the different phase of their project. And it'd be helpful to kind of have design phase should be maybe, you know, 8 to 12 months, procurement. I don't know what the process here. And then construction, we know depending on what it is, it could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So I think having that frame, that ideal frame would be helpful. not for this meeting, but I think going forward to be more transparent for the public so they understand.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, we've got that information, so
Okay.
we kind of got a general breakdown of, hey, I kind of call it the birth to death of a project. We kind of got all of that broken down.
Okay.
So we can, more than happy to kind of share that.
Councilmember Silver, you'll also see this sort of pre-planning, pre-design speaks exactly to what you're talking about doing a lot of that early work and engagement up front. So when we are ready to start a project, we have a design, we've got a plan for procurement, and we can move right to construction. So we're not spending, like you said, a continuous do loop of hearing something, responding to it, hearing something, responding to it. So,
Yeah. And I'll just, one last thing on the slide from the lessons learned in 2017. It basically started from ground zero, in my opinion. Every project, okay, ground zero, meaning we had no design. We were just starting from scratch, going out and do public input. Again, lesson learned, in my opinion, and I think staff's opinion, that we want to step off on a different foot going forward on that. So in my opinion, big lesson learned for us on that. Here's just, so now this kind of goes to the slide on where we're thinking that Councilmember Lambert Melton's earlier question. So I kind of got big buckets here. We'll do a little bit deeper dive into these buckets. Again, about 40 million. So let me go back to the steady state of 203 million. So basically what we have shown you here is what $103 million will look like from a transportation bond standpoint going forward. So that's kind of what this 40, 48, 15, they add up to the 103 million. So again, kind of three big buckets here. Outstanding commitments, I'll go into a little more detail, roughly about 48 million. Adopted plans we've got out here. Y'all just recently heard in the last couple months about the downtown mobility plan, the active mobility plan, and things of that nature. And then we go to programs here, so about 15 million. So again, in our head, this is kind of what a $103 million bond would look like to you going forward. And we'll do a little bit deeper dive into each one of these. So the outstanding commitments. So we kind of put 48 million. Again, this is just some kind of preliminary estimates, and this is kind of going off what we've recently seen with some of our projects that have been coming in and going to construction. So as y'all are aware, the Marsh Creek Trail Road project, Councilmember Patton, that's been in your district. That was a 2017 project. We kind of deferred that, put that on the back burner. We're roughly at like 65, 70% on that one. So that's the one that we're trying to look to bring forward with the 2026 bond consideration. Of course, that's going to touch on a lot of transit access, safety, multimodal, just in our world. That's what we're thinking of the project like that. And again, I've got some deeper slides on each one of these. Ebenezer Church Road, Councilmember Jones, I touched on that probably a couple months ago with the active mobility plan. I'll go in a little more depth on that one. Then we've got the BRT general purpose lanes associated with our southern BRT. So that's again, I'll have a slide on that one as well. Then in the middle, we kind of touch on the adopted plans here. So the big jump, as y'all heard in the last kind of couple months here, really excited about pushing this forward. You know, back in the day, we kind of used to have a bike plan. We used to have a ped plan. We really want to look at this. This is more cohesive for us. So we're really looking at an active mobility plan going forward. And then touch on, as y'all all aware, which is really one of our top priorities, is safety. Y'all hear much around the Vision Zero program, Safe Streets for All. So that's kind of our middle bucket. And then kind of programs that y'all hear sometimes, some may be a little bit new here. Our neighborhood traffic calming program, Will Shoemaker's over that group. You continuously see projects come to you. We've been very successful, frankly, over the last couple of years. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, we used to push about 5 or 6 projects forward each year. Now we're doing about 15 to 20. So again, we're trying to scale some of these programs out here and frankly, get stuff on the ground quicker. Partnerships.
No, keep going. I'll ask you.
Partnerships in general, that's everything from NCDOT to potentially private development. Do we have some P3 opportunities to look at out here? So that's kind of looking forward. And then advanced acquisition, I got a couple slides on that and what that would look like and kind of where our head is thinking specifically around advanced acquisition as far as those opportunities.
Complicated question, maybe Marshall or Michael could answer. Just want to talk about the big elephant in the room, Six Forks. New project was just developed. There's gonna be a transportation committee. There'll still be conversations. We reallocated those funds to cover shortfalls on other projects. But the issue of Six Forks hasn't gone away. And I don't know how these conversations are gonna unfold. Clearly, it's way outside and it's gonna only be more than the 93. I'm sure it's now gonna be north of 100 million. How do we handle that? Because we as council are dealing with a credibility issue. We voted for it, 2017, it got reallocated. Is it just goes away or how does it come back? Because the growth is only going to continue. It's not just North Hills, but it's people living to the north and people living to the south and everyone east and west. How do we handle that one? When I was asking Allison about the question about steady state, if things roll over, is that something that could be phased over time? So it's, and I know there's economies of scale of having construction site on site rather than doing it in phases. So I'm just trying to understand how we deal with something that was voted on, expectation, critical corridor. I know it's a state facility, what their role is, but to me, in this conversation, I just don't know how I need to answer constituents because that's still a conversation. Every meeting I have, what about Six Forks?
Yeah, happy to take that. So if you'll recall, we did not take all the money out of that project. There are dollars that are still available to do some signal work.
Correct.
Millbrook
Sidewalk.
will help with that. We've already installed that sidewalk work.
Right.
There's other signals, in the north Glen
And the
area.
Millbrooks, Six
And
Forks.
some crossings there. I think what we're likely to see are more incremental improvements to that corridor to help with the efficiency. There's I would say, widening on a project like that. The numbers that we're seeing are probably don't support the kinds of widening projects that we've talked about in the past. So we're gonna have to look at more incremental improvements where we can gain efficiencies out of the signalization. I think the big thing there is to address how lane widths work and the lane continuity in places. That's a little bit of a bigger thing, but that's something that we're gonna need more time. And I think if we do those incremental improvements around signalization, we can look at that, evaluate it, and see what other things we need to do beyond that.
So that work is ongoing because it's on every meeting I have.
Sir.
The topic of Six Forks comes up. It starts with, we voted for this, what happened, but I think having those points would be helpful to see what the end result is and how long, but thank you.
And we can do some follow-up. That work, as you said, the design work for those are ongoing. We'll get some schedules around when we anticipate that going to bid and going to construction.
So Mike, when you said the numbers that y'all were seeing, what numbers are you referencing?
The travel number, traffic numbers, levels of congestion, things like that.
So you think it's less than what
What
the
some of it-
perception of the public it actually is?
I think what we're seeing is that numbers have been either been steady or have actually in some cases decreased over time. Where I think what we all feel the congestion issues there, but really, let's be honest about it. The problem is the funnel, it's at the very bottom of the funnel, which is at the interchange with Fourth Ward. We can widen the top of the funnel and we're just going to invite more traffic to that. But as long as the bottom of the funnel is still what it is, we're going to continue to have congestion.
I think one thing that's really important is understanding decision points that have been made. Can we, at some point in a manager's update, get a summary of when things came to council and the decision that council may have made at that point?
Absolutely.
To give us some feedback.
Or maybe best
History.
handled in your committee meeting.
Yeah, wherever.
Yeah.
But I think having that information,
Yeah.
I think would be key with those that may not have been around when certain decision points were made, that'll help us drive the conversation forward. Cause, I don't.
And we've got that information. We can have that for you. We're gonna hear that in the February meeting of TNT. We'll have more information about the trends, the MIS study that comes in, so it could be a more full body conversation when we get to that.
Yeah, and just to provide further direction, I think this is very helpful. Something that I thought was really helpful at the public hearing on the rezoning case was when Councilmember Patton pointed out that our Six Forks Road project terminated prior to the what do you call the peak of the funnel, were you saying?
440.
The bottom of the funnel. And so I think that there's perception, and I think there's data and historical information, and all of that would be helpful to have daylighted about what the actual traffic counts are. what the impact of the Six Forks Road project may or may not have been anyway, and what strategies may be moving forward. I think that's a really important piece to highlight. We'll bring up.
And the lessons learned to me are very important because like, for example, for Councilmember Jones, oh, Ebenezer Church Road is now in consideration, then whoops, there are some other issues. So I think it's just very helpful that we communicate what those lessons learned are, and then how are we going to change our approach going forward.
I'll get to
Did you go? Did you have something for
So I was just gonna say really quickly, like, Six Forks Road is not the only place where we didn't deliver what we promised, so it's timely. It feels very poignant right this moment based on like, you know, it's been in the news cycle, but like, as a reminder, voters voted to tax themselves for the Marsh Creek Road project, and we canceled that years ago. So
Okay.
while we're not hearing it at every CAC meeting, that is still a place where we failed some voters who were expecting that. So like, it's just important to remember that it's just important. Remember it on balance, you know?
And then I was just wondering as because I'm so grateful for the information that you've given us over the years on, you know, the lessons learned, and I'm able to communicate that to everyone. However, have you guys had conversations and judged if we do a transportation bond, we have altered that perception of what that bond could deliver to the people who are going to vote on it? Because we can put with all of the good intentions and say, look, we've done this, but not everybody in the community is going to understand all of that. And is it better to put one that might fail? Like, have you done a measurement of how could you even do that, of how the public is going to perceive that? Because I don't want to put one up that after going through North Hills, after going with Marsh Creek, the voters are like, I don't believe this, I'm just going to vote no. Because that would be the worst case scenario, if we put it on the bond with all good intentions and then it fails and it doesn't happen. Have you guys had those discussions?
So we've had some internal discussion, you know, looking at, you know, I'll just pick on the middle one, the adopted plans there again. We've tried to, you know, in conversation with the community, what are we hearing from them? You know, bike and ped, I'm just gonna pick on that one, for example. We want to see more of that. So again, we try to be intentional based on feedback we've been hearing to what we would consider bringing forward. We would hope, in all honesty, that it would have the support there. So I think we're trying to be intentional on what we are bringing forward.
And just one more comment on that. There was a comment during the steady state bond presentation about we could do 4 years, 2 years flexibility there. And then I remember a greater discussion at our last retreat about a lesson learned for transportation bonds, making smaller projects that we can deliver on a better timeline. And so if there is flexibility, maybe transportation bonds are things we're looking at doing every 2 years on a steady state, smaller amounts, and actually delivering projects. But I think that's a greater conversation for later.
Good feedback there. And again, a great lesson learned. I think kind of going forward there, being more intentional, more sizable on things that we can deliver.
And doing it pre-work, so when we get to the bond, we're ready to go.
Yeah. All right, so here's drill down a little bit on the Marsh Creek, as Councilmember Patton had mentioned. So this was basically a project went from Capitol Boulevard all the way over to New Hope Road. That was going to be a combination of a 2-lane divided / undivided throughout that corridor. We're going to be looking at a large effort on road safety. Again, bike and ped infrastructure. You kind of see on the left and right there in the top screen there where we've got large multi-purpose paths on one side, bike lanes, things of that nature. So that's kind of just a deep dive. We're kind of looking at probably around 25 million. Again, just kind of rough numbers, what we think this project would kind of cost going forward there. So, again, that's on the Marsh Road. Again, this was a 2017 bond. So again, that's one we kind of held. We're like 65-70% design and engineering services right now on that one. All right, Ebenezer Church Road. So I feel like this is about as old as me. And that's pretty old. So this is a 2011 bond. Okay, 2011. So we've had multiple conversations myself. I've been in those with the airport authority. This is a larger project from Lumley Road all the way over to Umstead. Okay, big picture, Lumley Road to Umstead. Been talking to the airport for probably 10 or 15 years on runway expansion. Okay, well, that's finally happening. Okay, after probably a decade and a half, that conversation's finally happened. So airport authority is pumping in about 2.5 billion in the airport. A part of that, infrastructure improvement is gonna be a brand new runway, about 2 miles. And so we did not want to move forward with the entire project because part of the airport project is going to realign Lumley Road. Okay, we've been talking about that for years, finally come to fruition. The runway project's about a 5-year project, so I think 2029 is when they're looking at finishing that. So, which is why we kind of split the Ebenezer Church Road, Lumley Westgate Road, kind of split that into 2 projects. So this is a section here. Basically, y'all can see the quarry here to the right. And then over to the far left is basically Grayland Drive, the Umstead Road park entrance over there. So Highway 70 here in the middle. This is a combination of bike out in the street, buffered bike lanes, bike behind the sidewalk, just due to some of the existing infrastructure and private development that we've got out there along Ebenezer Church Road. So that is just kind of high level what we're looking at doing and trying to move this project forward. We kind of put around about 8 million in on this project here, just kind of looking ahead here. So again, that's just a little bit of a deep dive here on the Ebenezer Church Road. All right, Southern BRT. So had some recent conversation with some of you about what this looks like kind of going forward. So we're hoping to go to like 60% design probably in the summer of this year. So as part of the Southern BRT, which you can kind of see here, starts in downtown and then basically kind of goes out to where the Super Walmart site is out in Garner. A lot of this is basically on route with Wilmington Street. And then as you kind of get out here to South Saunders and the Wilmington flyover, then we kind of where this dash line is, kind of goes on the new location out there in front of the shopping center, the International Food Store, and then kind of comes in the back door here of the Walmart here. So as part of this new location here, we're going to be looking at, and this is just kind of a rough rendering here, but just kind of looking at what that cross section would look like. So as part of the bond considerations, the general purpose lanes are not funded through the Wake County Transit Fund. Okay, so that's the reason we've got to lean on looking at a bond consideration for general purpose lanes. So that's roughly about 15 million. Okay, it's about 15 million on that. Again, we're probably going to be looking at going to construction probably sometime in late 27 on this one, early 28. So that's again just kind of rough idea on where we are with the Southern BRT. Next one, y'all just recently heard the big jump here. So the active mobility plan, really excited about this. As y'all kind of probably seen on the side here, the 5 miles of new sidewalks and basically 50 miles of bike infrastructure over the next 5 years. That's something that frankly, Byron and myself are really kind of getting geared up and really trying to push on staff. I think we can do it. Again, we just got to get the pieces in place here to do that. So really excited about this, kind of going forward here. We've actually got some, what I call, plans already on the shelf. Some of our existing bike infrastructure out here today is what I call not hardened. So you got kind of the vertical flexi posts that you see. Frankly, they're a nightmare for me, from a maintenance standpoint, because we're always putting them back in place and they're kind of expensive. And so we've got several bike infrastructure projects already on the ground today. Let me pick on the West Harrington Street. Okay, that's one that frankly, we could go out there today. It's been on the ground about 4 or 5 years now. We'd actually, our goal is to go out there and put hardened curb and basically have that as a protected bikeway, basically from downtown over at Martin Street all the way up to Peace. So that's kind of giving that as an example of things, frankly, we've got on the shelf today. We could have the money, go pull it off and start doing some of those hardening projects out here. So, and then we've got some future projects as part of the active mobility plan on things that we kind of start from ground zero or portions of. So a little bit about the active mobility plan. The comprehensive safety action plan here. So just want to kind of touch on here the what you're kind of looking at here. So on the far left, a high risk network. Basically, I kind of tell people that's our proactive approach on where we think, just based on traffic volumes, congestion, the size of the road, things of that nature. This is where we think our risks are gonna be, okay? So in my opinion, I use the word proactive on that. So looking ahead, looking at tomorrow, what we need, that's basically what your graph chart on the left is. Right is reactive. That's where we know we've got known issues today. Okay, so again, kind of left is looking proactive, where we need to be looking at long-term investing on some of those high injury risk networks. The high injury networks are where we know we've kind of got known issues out there today. So again, all around safety, including safety action plan. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go in these a little bit. You probably have seen some of these you may not have, so it may be new to you. So the big jump mobility plan I touched on, the Capitol Boulevard corridor study, Councilmember Silver will appreciate this one, probably back on his watch when he was the planning director. I've got a slide on that. The Southern Gateway implementation, and then the Trine Road Extension Advanced Acquisition, which is frankly probably not on anybody's radar right now. We just want to kind of bring that forward, like be on yours. So big jump here. So mobility and safety. Kind of see, this is an example right here. If y'all have been down St. Mary Street, we kind of want to do more of this kind of stuff, okay? So this was actually a pilot project for us. We've actually had a lot of success out there. So again, this is just kind of an example. Here's some of our plans over here to the left, our downtown mobility study, active mobility plan, and then Vision Zero Safe Streets for All. And the Vision Zero Safe Streets for All, so Sean Driscoll is the Vision Zero program manager. He's going to be bringing something back to y'all in March, just all around Vision Zero. So just kind of foreshadowing what's going to be coming on that.
And just to mention that I did meet with the school board chair, right, who was very interested in this, and I think connections have already been made. But
Okay.
I love just particularly trying to protect school children
Yep.
and make those zones high priority. And I know that's what you just showed with Broughton, so that was a great start. But it just seems like we've got a school board chair that is very eager to collaborate, and I think could be great.
No, really, really proud of Sean and his team. He's got Sean, James, and Shane, and they actually are very proactive and meet with the school systems all the time. So they have got a whole laundry list, frankly, of things around the schools that we need to be doing. And so glad to make that connect. I know Emily had pushed that to me, so we're going to reach out to them on that. All right, so the Capitol Boulevard corridor study. So I'll kind of go into detail a little bit on this. This may be new to some, may not to others here. So big picture. My friends at DOT have a great relationship with them. Let's just say sometimes they're not as expedient as I'd like for them to be with kind of sharing information. I'll just kind of tell you big picture out here. We go out on Capitol Boulevard today, okay, heading either north or southbound. Just kind of give you a reference here, Atlantic Avenue. There's two separate bridges out on Capitol Boulevard today, okay? DOT came to us probably last summer and said, hey, we got a need out here to replace these two bridges, two separate bridges, okay, out there. DOT's mentality, whatever breaks, just go put it back in kind, okay? Well, we knew this Capitol Boulevard corridor study has been out here, as Councilmember Silver probably knows, probably over a decade. And we basically said, hey, there's an opportunity out here with the NCDOT bridge project, which they're looking at going to construction probably sometime in 2028. Okay, so we've probably got a couple of years of kind of working through some logistics. The council feels like this is a direction you want to go. But basically what we want to end up doing is looking at combining those two bridges into one bridge, one large bridge that would handle traffic in both ways. So I'm going to kind of go ahead and kind of show you here. So right over here where this kind of dash line is, this is existing Capitol Boulevard today. Okay, to kind of give you a perspective here, the food bank right here. This is the intersection of Salvation Army right across the street, intersection of Crabtree Boulevard and Capitol up here. Basically, from where this new bridge would be, all the way down to Crabtree Boulevard, would all be on one side. Okay? One side. And what happens with this existing portion of Capitol Boulevard that's out there along the old, car dealership, which is now owned by Wake County Public Schools, that would basically become a collector street off of the roundabout down here with the, blunt person. Okay? So I know that's hard to imagine. You go out there today, Capitol Boulevard separated probably by 100 feet out there. Just imagine heading northbound on Capitol. Again, heading northbound, car dealership, the old car dealership, you see a bunch of school buses out here right now. Imagine that becomes a collector road. Okay, and the road actually moves over to the west side. Okay, so this is about a mile long. This is an opportunity for us, frankly, and I kind of tell people this, very transparent and real. If DOT moves forward with this project, as far as two individual projects, you probably say we're going to be left with this for the next 75 years. Okay. So y'all just need to give some thought about opportunities to look at. DOT is going to do this. There's an opportunity for us to touch a lot of what was shown and studied in the Capitol Boulevard corridor. Again, with the vision back in 2012. Again, I touched on the bridge replacements. The mayor has mentioned sponge cities, everything from environmental resiliency, again, transit infrastructure, bike and ped. We've actually got an old railroad, CSX railroad up here that we're potentially have some conversations to see if we could utilize some rail to trail. We've been working with Stephen Bentley's group about what some rail connections could look like over to the Raleigh Iron Works. And then, of course, this is the Atlantic Whitterton Mill intersection that a lot of you have kind of heard some safety concerns there. So again, just kind of big picture, a lot going on out here. This is a collaboration, frankly, at the city of Raleigh of probably 5 or 6 departments right now. Public Utilities has got some known needs out here as far as looking at upgrading some infrastructure. The stormwater has got some needs out here as far as infrastructure. The Raleigh Parks and Recs Greenway, our sales and transportation. So again, it's really a great opportunity, not only for our internal departments to look at collaborating and how can we come together and bring funds together, but also it's an opportunity with us with NCDOT. So early conversations going on with them. This is on their radar. We're very much telling them, hey, we're bringing these ideas in from the council. Because frankly, we need to start kind of giving them a sense of where our head is at on this opportunity here.
Paul, can you just, because this is also a crossing Department of Administration, right, which we have talked to them and they've been very collaborative. The Department of, Public Safety, who's thinking about selling the old state fairgrounds, and then, as you're mentioning, DOT. So I guess just to be clear, do we need to, as a council, engage with NCDOT's board or staff to try and influence this decision on the bridges?
So let me just say, any political help is always probably helpful. Okay, I'll just kind of put it to you like that. So if you can drop nuggets or whatever, again, we've been very intentional with DOT. Really up the food chain at DOT. So again, we have told them how important this is to us as far as an opportunity out here. Because again, I just tell y'all, things move forward with DOT. Again, I'm not holding a gun to you, but I'm just telling this is the reality of it. They move forward with their project, you're going to get 2 separate bridge projects. And frankly, we're probably going to miss a big window out here to looking at this opportunity. Okay. I'll just kind of leave it at that. Yep, I'm sorry.
This is my daily drag, so I'm very interested in this. And certainly that section of Capitol is, not very hospitable. Most of the businesses there in between the 2 directions are not in operations anymore. And I think sometimes lend themselves to behaviors that come with that.
Yeah.
So I think that could also be like a public safety win too. But I'm curious, this carries a lot of traffic. Will the capacity be the same, like number of travel lanes and stuff when you do the realignment?
Yeah, I
As they
think,
are today.
yeah, we're looking at, and then part of that conversation we have to think about, and we've got in the mix on this is transit, what those BRT needs are.
Mhm.
So we're having those conversations. with NCDOT and then with our internal conversations about, all right, what does this footprint look like today and kind of what those needs are gonna be looking like going forward, and BRT has got to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I know you didn't mention planning, but I'm sure they're part of this as well. But the land use implications here are also tremendous. And so
So let me-
as you reshape the transportation corridor, having a park, greenway, sponge park all makes sense. But there are underperforming land uses out there. And what's great about this is if you start looking at, increasing the intensity, this has minimal displacement issues because it's all commercial. It's underperforming and it could unlock a lot of potential, especially with there's a BRT. It just makes an easy connection.
So I put my developer hat on. I've been doing development here for really my entire career. I would totally agree with you on that. Say huge opportunity out here, just from an economic development standpoint, huge.
Two things. I think this is a critical corridor because this is the connection between downtown and midtown. And so when you look at how our city's growing, it's growing very linear, like Atlanta kind of did. And getting this land use right and this connectivity right, I think is going to be critical for the next 20 years. And so I agree with Councilmember Silver, our own internal land use. I also think we need to loop the county in because they own a huge site there and they're parking school buses on it. And so, if this.
You read my mind, so look, I've said that. Big opportunities out here from the county, again, private development, affordable housing, big opportunities out here, because to your point, school buses are just sitting there today.
That's right. Well, yes. And then the last part, this rail trail potential at the top right. I get asked about this all the time. If you're at Gateway Plaza, you can see Raleigh Ironworks. You just can't get to it. And so some pedestrian connection here is going to be huge.
Yeah.
When it says rail trail potential, what does that mean?
So basically, that's looking at some of the existing rail we've got up here, kind of going back to Atlantic Boulevard.
Yeah, but what do we have to do to make it happen?
Well, we're just in early conversation with the railroad to see what is that use gonna be? Can we look at opportunity to acquire that or have some type of easement on it? So that's what we're looking at, that opportunity to kind of drop folks off of the Greenway Trail into the Raleigh Ironworks area. But to your point, Councilmember Met, yes, we're gonna be looking at this entire corridor through here and intersection on how we connect this all up.
Is Greyhound involved too? Because they just moved there.
Yeah, so we hadn't had any conversation with them yet.
Okay.
Again, really want to get a temperature check from y'all on how you feel about these conversations, because again, what we don't want to do is go spend somebody up. We don't have the.
No, we
elected
should make this happen.
Yeah, I like the idea. I'm looking at it. And
I'm
it
not,
wipes
I'm
out.
not gonna tell y'all to raise your hands here, but you can work back through the manager's office and give me some direction on this, because
Yeah,
He's been telling us for a while here, this is a piece of his big idea.
yeah, I like it and everything, but I know it wipes out their location if I look at that map the way it's drawn.
so that, to this point right here, exactly. And again, we may have some opportunities. We haven't done a deep dive on the design yet. So again, just know that this is just big picture concept, what I call fat magic markers out here, okay?
And just for all clarity, what we're talking about here is doing that advanced plan. This is, put this into a pot of money that would get us a design that would have those conversations, get the groundwork laid, get us ready to go. So, and to me, the beauty of this project is I can see a way that this can be done in incremental pieces where it can be, normal sized bites. We don't have to go with some Herculean effort right out of the gate to get it.
So let's touch on that then, again, to Michael's point, and I'll get to your, to Michael's point here. We can take some smaller chunks and bites at this, okay? Early acquisition on some real estate, early, designs out here. Again, we don't probably have to front load the entire thing out here on this. So when we're thinking about steady state bonds or whatever, just think about those opportunities, those smaller bites to continue to move projects like this forward, not all starting from ground zero. So.
Yeah, and to build on the point that you can be at Gateway Plaza and see the ironworks, and we should be able to get there. There is like a big grade change right there. And so I would say I would just offer, like, if there is one of these, like, if a conversation with the rails trails thing feels like it's gonna be another 15 years in the making because of all the machinations of government, like,
let's not preclude like something like a grand staircase or whatever, you know, like.
Let's just buy one of those properties that's in the middle and
So
make
we're
the
already,
connection.
we've already done some early, just like, what would some real estate cost out here? So again, we're already trying to think this through, okay? So trying to just get ahead of what y'all may be thinking on these types of opportunities here. Southern Gateway implementation. So, this may be new, may not to some of y'all here. So again, this has been a study that's been out here for quite some time. I'm gonna try to kind of show you what kind of big picture is happening out here. So this is, of course, adopted in the comprehensive plan. We've got some BRT corridor with Western Boulevard here and opportunities. Again, a lot of conversation about connectivity from Dix to downtown, and then partnership opportunities out here. So kind of get your bearing straight here. So Red Hat Amphitheater, this is kind of where the new location will be, South Street here. So City Gateway Development, Kindly Street. Kindly Street is gonna, this whole area right here, okay, coming into downtown, is gonna look very different than what you see today. And where I'm going with this is Kindly Street extension today is up in the air. Okay, it's up in the air. You got a big wall. Probably many of y'all have been on the on-ramp here to get on McDowell Street. Kindly Street is actually gonna drop. It's gonna tie in out here to Martin Luther King / Western Boulevard, okay? Tie in. This ramp is gonna go away. All the movements are gonna go over here in this quadrant, okay? Big picture, that's what's gonna be happening. This Kindly Street's actually, they're already getting site plans. Some of this has already been built here, apartment complex and things. But we're starting to see some site plans come in on this. This property has been bought by the developer, was owned by DOT. So that is moving, okay? Big change. That's gonna feel and look different for people. Again, you can kind of see up under here, the existing ramp today that's there. And then you kind of see what's highlighted in black. This is where all of the movements are gonna end up kind of changing, okay? To get up to Western Boulevard and to get down to McDowell Street. Okay, so it's gonna look and feel very different than what you are used to today.
Paul, would that also have pedestrian access? Because I know that Mira has talked about trying to work with us on an overpass in that same location coming off where you have that natural elevation to.
So you'll read my mind on that. I'm gonna get to that in a
Okay.
minute and tell you about some opportunities, about what we're just kind of thinking big picture on that. We've had some early conversations, with the City Gateway Development team. Over here, Heritage Park, okay, lots of conversations. We're actually setting up a meeting, Heritage Park, City of Raleigh and NCDOT, kind of talk about what that looks and feels like to them. I'll tell you, great conversation. I feel like we've kind of landed in a good spot with Heritage Park. We've had a lot, Kenneth and his team on the development side have had a lot of conversations with them. So again, this is gonna look and so you kind of see under there today, the old Western, the ramp that kind of goes to Western Boulevard. This interchange gonna kind of look and feel differently. We've been fully transparent with Heritage Park. They, I think, are definitely excited about the opportunities of connectivity and everything of that nature. So their development plan, this is the old footprint out there today that exists today. We've got, development plans, in-house that they've shared with us about what those opportunities look like. So again, I'm pretty excited, about, these opportunities out here. And of course, we're talking about BRT, where some stops may happen along their frontage. And of course, some stops over here where South Saunders goes under Western Boulevard today, looking at probably a BRT station over here. And again, probably a BRT station somewhere along this frontage on Heritage Park. So just our conversations, much like the Capitol Boulevard, we're thinking about some advanced planning in this area here. And again, continuing our conversation about what this interchange looks like, what these opportunities are. And then I'll just go to the conversation with what the mayor just mentioned about just pedestrian connectivity. So there's been just some early renderings and whatever of the City Gateway development of potentially bringing something over to this quadrant. And that quadrant kind of looking and feel like a little bit of a park open space. Okay. And then they would take, then the rendering would basically look at bringing something across, McDowell Dawson, coming up Western Boulevard and somehow dropping into Dix Park. Now, I'll just tell you, that's one opportunity. Another one that we just brainstormed internal and actually just kind of toyed around with the city gateway was they've got development. So if you can kind of picture a building coming out of the screen here, we own this property here. Okay. This is city property. Now, what about an opportunity to get over to here, get near Convention Center, Red Hat, and again, I'm just planting the seed. Okay, this is high low, just conversation. Don't run out there and say, this is what we're gonna do. These are just opportunities that we thought about, connectivity in downtown. Hey, we've got this property here. What about getting some connectivity over to Heritage Park where it connects them up? Okay, comes over and then crosses over and gets to Dix. So that's just another opportunity to maybe look at connecting the broader downtown from many aspects, not just like the city gateway project. So again, those are just ideas that we thought about. DOT has been in some early conversations about what some elevated pedestrian bridge or walkway would look like. So again, that's just things we're thinking about out here.
That's a small question.
So anyway, kind of big picture, and then the partnership opportunities, again, City Gateway, we kind of talked about the what if scenario. If we did something this direction, could be some partnerships there. And frankly, it could be some partnerships any other direction that we may want to choose on this. So we're not hard and fast on anything out here. Really just planting the seed to kind of tell y'all, we're thinking in our shop about how we, I think Heather kind of mentioned the other day with big ideas, kind of the spider web approach on how we connect downtown, what that looks like, a big picture. All right, so this is probably new for many of y'all. Tryon Road Extension, probably don't hear or not heard much about this in the past. This kind of really ugly color here, red is Garner's jurisdiction. Hook Garner's not on the island. So I might have lost some brownie points with my colleagues in Garner. Of course, you can see Raleigh. Go back over here. It's really kind of odd how the breakup of the land is out here. You kind of see we come back to Raleigh over here, okay? We've got some conversations going on right now with planning and development and whatever around some potential development here. This is where I want you to focus. What's highlighted in yellow? Likely an undeveloped piece of property when you think about it long term. Tryon Road is keep me honest, a two lane divided. Because this is one we actually scaled down back in the day. Tryon Road used to be a 4-lane median divided on the comprehensive plan. We've now scaled that down to a 2-lane divided. So as you look to kind of thread this needle, and it's off the map here, Tryon Road goes over 40, okay? And it kind of ties over into Sunnybrook Road, long term. And 25 years ago, I did a development over there on the other side. It kind of brings back memories now. If you go out there on Sunnybrook Road where the high school is, you go back in the neighborhood, you'll go back there and you'll see a big pile of dirt that we got the developer to kind of start to forecast what a flyover would be over 40. Okay. So again, kind of full circle now, 25 years later, we're kind of having this conversation on the other side. Kenneth, keep me on from this. A lot of development patterns that are happening in Garner that aren't showing on here. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot. So currently today, there's active development on this parcel right now that would establish kind of that intersection with Creech Road. And this kind of larger parcel here and then some of the assemblage back here, Habitat for Humanity has a pretty substantial development going there within Garner's jurisdiction that has brought the conversations to Raleigh and Garner both kind of talking through this corridor and how we start to kind of look at how we set the stage for the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support the growth in the area.
So I want to kind of put this out there as a bucket when we talk about early acquisitions and things of that nature. This is where we need to be thinking, instead of trying to be reactive down the road, just thinking about proactive and where do we want to secure some of these property interests for us, for the city, kind of going forward, because likely this is not going to be a buildable lot. Okay, let's just be honest with it. So that's kind of big picture. on where we're thinking with the Trine Road early acquisition.
Those apartments should be opening like in months.
So that's the end of our slide. So again, I kind of want to end by saying, I feel confident that looking forward, the bond opportunities that I think we're in a better place, just headspace altogether, just on lessons learned that we gained from the previous bond. Again, looking at smaller sizable chunks, and kind of getting on the steady state that Ryan and his team have been talking about here. So that is the end of our presentation. Happy to take any more questions.
Can you go back to the Southern Gateway for a second? So I know a few of us got a presentation from the Gateway Development team. I know Lenny right now doing projects is kind of on hold. In terms of timing that connection, because I think resolving that would give a lot of people, it would take the uncertainty about where that connection from downtown to Diggs is going to go. How are you timing that? That one seems a little bit more urgent. If the Kindly connection is going to occur, I know they talked about, as the mayor said, going over Western and then having a pedestrian bridge basically attached to Western Boulevard, then takes you down to the Dix entrance, right at South Saunders and Western. What is the timing of that one? Because that seems like a lot of parts, NCDOT, going over Western, there's a lot involved. But that, I think, as it starts to evolve, I think it would be good for the public to know what is being envisioned. What is the planning process and the timeline for that? Because it seems like an opportunity you don't want to lose, because I saw how they have kind of this plaza at the Western McDowell location, and then that's a mound of kind of a mound scenic high point that you can see Dix from there. What's the timing of that?
So I'll tell you, Michael and I met with them probably in the last couple months. Just they kind of shared that vision or whatever. Again, they've got some site plans. It's still a phased project out here that they're looking at along this here. So what I kind of see happening is, let's just say if this is a route that we as a city feel like is the best route, likely there's some partnership opportunities to get something over here to this.
Right.
Then we probably as a city are gonna have to think about, how do we get from here over to here? And what I would say is we gave them information in the meeting. And again, I kind of go back to this one, about, hey, this is another opportunity. Have y'all looked at that? Have y'all thought about that? Does this bring, again, this idea, does this bring greater connectivity to downtown? So I would say we could plant that seed. The ball is actually in their court right now to kind of chew on that and see how that either fits in their model or doesn't. And then our plan is to come back with them and kind of see what those next steps would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so everything that you showed us, Paul, I love, I want to do it all. But I'm curious with 103 million, if that is what we're going for, not all these projects make it. I mean, there are ones that we can implement, we have the designs, and then there's kind of this is to come and we've got to figure out what's next. So what are we going to hear, or when are we going to hear those projects, and how will they get prioritized for a potential bond?
I would say we should bring that back at a later date here. I mean, probably in the near future. I would say I'm gonna do a little bit deeper dive on those questions there. So again, just kind of high level here, kind of planting the seed on what we're thinking. I think those next steps would be to dig in to those kinds of specifics to say, hey, this project, we're thinking about making something up here. $3 million, let's do some early design on it. That's where I think those next steps would be, to bring that information back to y'all.
And I think just to continue with this conversation about the public and their interest in supporting these, we need to have results, right? So we need to show results across the city. We need people to feel like, yes, this is doable.
Yeah.
So smaller funding,
Like that.
projects, I think are really important. And I think the big jump is also a great selling point, because it is something we can do a lot of small projects across the city and show impact quickly.
Yeah, we want to build that confidence, really, at the end of the day. It's the goal. Build confidence in our resident constituents out here. That's the end of mine. I think, y'all have probably stuck with me again, maybe on the next one, or we're shifting. Okay, good. All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. So I know you've been sitting for a while, so I'm going to give you an official breakdown. So you have exactly 10 minutes to get back here. And for our listening crowd, we also are going to put you all on break as well. So 10 minutes. All right, good afternoon. We are going to resume the council retreat. We're going to start back up with our housing bond conversation, and I'm joined by Emma Sutton, the Director of Housing and Community Development, as well as ACM Evan Raleigh, who has housing in his portfolio.
And we're gonna pull the last one.
I said that. Okay. Yeah. All right, thanks.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We are gonna talk about the housing portion of the bond. We are gonna talk a little bit about the current bond and the state of things, consideration for next bond, and we're gonna go over just at a really high level, the mixed income housing development model. Just to preface all of this by saying, I'm coming back to you all with a lot more information that goes more in depth into a lot of these topics. So we are gonna try and keep it really high level, knowing that I'm coming back to talk more in depth about these things. So you all have seen this quite a bit. This is the current bond that was passed in 2020, and it had a 5-year spend through fiscal year 26. So you can see there we have the bond funds year over year, as well as the designated penny for housing funds. Both of those going towards multiple different sort of buckets and activities under housing. So you'll see here a majority of the last bond went towards housing development and preservation. We had a percentage, I think it's like 15% go towards home buyer assistance and preservation. And then just a little preview, we did not have any funds that were previously allocated towards homelessness response or any sort of mixed income development or new tools. Here are some considerations for the bond. So of course, the last bond was for 5 years of resources, so that was 16 million a year. We had the next bond in 6 years, after 6 years. And so for 2026, we had to look at providing 4 years of resources with the next bond schedule for 2030. We also really wanted to make sure that we were maintaining unit production numbers from the prior bond, as well as incorporating funding to implement unsheltered homelessness response. And then plus a one-time capitalization, we're recommending of at least 20 million to seed a mixed income development revolving loan fund. Here are our recommendations. So we are recommending, again, most of the bond to go towards housing development and preservation, and that includes activities such as acquisition, gap financing, which is, as you all know, the #1 tool that we have in our toolkit in order to provide affordable units that leverages 4% low-income housing tax credit projects. It does a really amazing job at what it's set up for. And then we have a portion of it, again, going towards home buyer assistance as well as homeowner rehabilitation. So there are limitations sort of in both of those categories, and there are a lot of sort of ways that we thought through how to bucket these out that we can talk about. And then we are offering the suggestion for 12 million in homelessness response, as well as the one-time capitalization of 21.5 million for mixed income development that we'll talk a little bit about as we go. So here are the annual amounts that you'll see here. So we've got the 14.4 million year over year. Again, that's going to keep at our present rate. So actually, no, we'll increase it slightly. So we talked about, we wanted to make sure that we are keeping our rate of production steady, but with this amount, we're actually at about 400 to 450 units a year on average, which is just a little above our prior year average. Our homebuyer and assistance and preservation, again, is really at a steady state. Those things are limited in a couple of ways by market demands, but then also for preservation, we have a lot of contractor capacity issues to overcome. And so we're really making sure that we are we want to be able to not over allocate funds in that bucket to account for those sort of market pressures that impact the work that we do. And then we are proposing $3 million in homelessness response per year. And that bucket can go towards different types of responses. So it can be, some of the largest need in our community, we know, are rapid rehousing as well as homelessness diversion and rapidly exiting people from shelter beds. So this money could go towards any number of those gaps that we have in our system currently. And then again, the one-time capitalization for the mixed income development, which would be an additional sort of tool in our toolkit for providing affordable units. It also has, it does not leverage LIHTC, so they're sort of not limited by things like qualified census tracts, by the qualified allocation plan and the requirements there. It also allows for true mixed income development. It is publicly owned. It is typically in these models, you have the public housing authority that owns the development, and these funds are capitalized by public dollars typically. And again, I'm going to come back and we're going to look at other communities and sort of be able to compare what our proposal here looks like as compared to other communities who have done this work. There aren't that many other communities who have done this work. We would really be among a growing number, I think, of communities that have taken on this innovative tool that really allows for affordable housing development, again, without LIHTC, which is just really not possible. So that 21 will, I have another slide on that. So let's go a little more into that. So now we're going to look at the production for each one of these buckets. So again, we're looking at 160 to 510 units annually under this annual allocation amount. And as you all know, that number is impacted mostly by land cost and the cost of per subsidy unit. So if you're looking at developments in more of the downtown core, you're going to have that lower number of units produced versus a higher number of units produced in those less expensive areas, sort of. For homebuyer assistance and preservation, again, we're proposing to stay steady. That produces around 40 to 50, or it assists 40 to 50 households annually under our homebuyer assistance and preservation buckets. So that includes down payment assistance as well as our homeowner rehabilitation program for seniors, low-income seniors and people with disabilities. For the homelessness response, I talked a little bit about there are different ways that those funds could fill the gap in our current homelessness system. If you're looking at rent assistance and case management, that would be the 125 households. So that would be around $24,000 per person per year to provide rent assistance and case management to end someone's homelessness. That's where that number comes into play. That number could be a lot higher if the intervention is diversion. Homelessness diversion is around $2,500 per person. And that can include all types of financial assistance, one-time, short-term financial assistance to make sure that someone does not enter the homelessness system and they remain stable where they are, or find sort of a quick solution to their homelessness. We know that around 70% more of people entering the homelessness system actually need diversion intervention, not rent assistance and case management for 2 years, which is sort of the rapid rehousing model. And then also, we're really looking at the shelter system that is overly burdened, and how can we rapidly exit people from that system in order to turn over those beds and serve more people per year in a true emergency way, where people who need beds in an emergency situation can have access to one. So for the mixed income development model, we are estimating that will provide around 200 units every 3 to 5 years. So that could fund one project or a couple of smaller projects. We've worked with a consultant over the last year, really planning and development, have led the charge on this. And
we've had consultants provide us information about market studies and what the cost of a project would look like. Now, keep in mind that a third of these units are going to be affordable. So they're going to be at that 80 to 60% AMI level. And then also that this is a revolving loan fund. So these units are going to sort of be produced in perpetuity by this revolving loan fund. So it allows for a cheaper, essentially a cheaper debt, so that there can be a mix of units, and then the sort of market rate units help subsidize the affordable units. So
The question, so these affordable units are in perpetuity, they don't sunset
that's
after
right.
10, 20, or 30 years, they're in perpetuity.
Great point.
Okay.
Exactly. And again, these are publicly owned developments. So this would be Raleigh Housing Authority owned developments. And so they would be responsible for sort of, maintaining the affordability and monitoring for those things, which is in their purview and which is what they do. So, and it's estimated that would revolve every 3 to 5 years. This, again, we're going to come back and sort of show you other communities and the levels that they have capitalized. And there are some communities that have done 100 million. There are some communities who've done 20 million. And I think the other advantage to mention is that this could also attract private dollars into the fund. So this could be an attractive way to sort of be able to do public-private partnership model in a way that produces affordable units again into perpetuity. So over and over again, we're going to see those funds recycle. So like I mentioned, we work for the Center for Public Enterprise, and they provided the preliminary market testing on several Raleigh sites. We estimate that $21 million could probably serve one sort of larger project, or a couple of smaller ones. Again, the one-time capitalization creates that standalone fund that could be immediately deployed. I think that's the other real advantage, is that, we're not waiting on LIHTC applications. We're not waiting on, we don't have to score a project for that, and we're not waiting on that process to happen. It can be immediately deployed. And then again, it can really attract additional private and mission-driven capital. That is the end of my presentation. It's short because, again, we're anticipating coming back, and happy to take your questions.
Yeah, thank you for, especially the mixed income development idea. Thanks for bringing us something new and exciting. Curious, when you say 125 plus households for the homelessness response, is that total
Per year.
per year?
So that's under
Okay.
that $3 million per year allocation would serve 125 people with that rent assistance and case management model, but it could serve many more people if it was utilized for something like diversion.
So that's quite a bit lower cost than our pilot, for example,
Well,
per person.
I mean, yes, I would say that the pilot, there was some infrastructure that was very much built for the pilot. That was a one-time sort of infusion to get us to the point of where we are now. So I think, we have sort of laid a lot of really helpful groundwork there.
Great.
A branch thing.
So, there are some that look at the number and they see the 101, they see the 101.5 million. They're saying, well, we want double that. Can you speak to the reasoning of that number? I know the big picture is in the 203, but as far as from a housing standpoint, we're roughly 20 million more than our last bond, which was 80. But can you speak to why that number was there, and the reason, the spin-off, the reason why we have to spend within a certain time frame? I think, so this may be need Allison to come in and speak to this, because I think for bonds, we have to spend so much in a certain time frame. And unlike transportation, and I'm answering some of my questions, but unlike transportation and parks, we know exactly which project we're doing. But I think there's some challenges maybe when it comes to housing.
I'll be honest, housing has done an outstanding job, with the plan that they put in place for the last bond and what they've been able to deliver. So I think, again, as we're moving into that steady state, that 4-year window, I don't have any concerns that they really won't be on that rate and pace, and be able to spend.
But if we increase the amount of money
Sure.
there, will we still be able to, like, do we know the projects that we're allocating the money to?
Sure, yeah, I mean, the delivery end, I mean, I'd have to turn that over to Emily. I guess I would just say we've been very successful in the past. So
You're saying there's only so much you can squeeze through the snake in a given time, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And I think, you know, when you look at the amount of developer demand that we see, I think that this is a nice fit with the demand that we see and what we're able to produce within the time constraints, as you mentioned, that we are under. So, yeah.
And I guess my last part of that, if someone were to come and they had a real number on what a real project would cost, as we're leading into a bond and describing it, we would probably have a better idea of that amount. Is that a good statement?
Of what amount?
So say I have identified some land and I say my project's gonna cost me 150 million. And I want the city to help me do it. And I know you're about to do a bond, you know, how does my 150 request, you know, fit into, you only have one-on-one?
Yeah, exactly. And 14.4 million in that bucket year over year.
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, when we score projects that come to us for gap financing, we're really looking at a variety of things about the financial stability of the project. So a project, you know, would really need to have multiple different sort of sources. And this tool, again, is really designed to leverage that 4% low-income housing tax credit project. So I think, you know, there's a portion of the financing stack that the city provides through this funding, as well as the county, as you all know, also provide gap financing largely together. We do that on the same project. So there's sort of a lot of different financing layers that happen with those specific projects. And this would be our annual allocations. This is what we'd be putting out, you know, year over year, saying a portion of this to say, this is how much the city can offer in that gap financing.
To follow up on that, we wouldn't necessarily build a bond to support a project, right? We look at the program activities that we have heard from the public and that we have supported across the spectrum of the housing continuum, from homelessness to home preservation, aging in place, and all of the things, as well as production. So the scenario of, I need $150 million to do that, we would be a partner, and whatever our participation would be out of our annual allocation, not necessarily we're going to do a $200 million bond to cover the cost of a $150 million project.
And Councilmember Branch, to answer your original question a little bit about the steady state. When we did 80 million, it was with the plan that we would come back in with the plan that we would come back in 6 years, which is where we are now. So that's a little under 14 million a year. What we're talking about here is 101.5, but it's a 4-year spending plan. So really with affordable housing, the best way to look at it is not how big the number is, it's how much annual support you are able to provide to this. Because we could make this a 6 or 7 year bond and it would be a bigger number, but because you lose spending power because of inflation, that would actually be worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we are able to produce more units on average annually with this amount, which, you know, considering inflation and construction costs, I think is saying.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I have 2 quick questions for me, but, so regarding homelessness response, there's like 1,100-ish unhoused folks, and this, if we take 125 households served, multiplied by 4-year spend, that's not that full amount. Diverting some, also understanding we're not the only people trying to end people's homelessness. Flashing forward to 5 years from now, if this were approved, do we envision that would get us to functional zero in homelessness?
Not this amount alone. So, you know, like you said, the continuum of care is really in charge of sort of, you know, overseeing how we achieve functional zero. They are in the process of developing their strategic plan.
any of these homelessness response activities have to be in true collaboration with all of our nonprofit partners, our continuum of care, the county who is really leading the way in homelessness response. So, you know, I think it will make a big impact, absolutely. However, it's not the full picture, right? So, and I think there's just no way that one entity could even attempt to take that on, considering all of the different components where you need just a lot of really deep collaboration and different types of funding streams in order to address the issue.
I had a second one.
So the 14 million in this scenario would be one bucket, but also our penny for housing would persist. And right now it's $11.8 million. Does the penny for housing mostly goes in that same bucket?
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so in totality, it'd be like 25 or 23. And then the penny will change its value each year.
Yes, so you would add 8.6 essentially to that 14.4 annually for penny.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we do have some of the penny going towards homelessness response currently too. So, that sort of came with the, you know, increase of the value of the penny. We were able to then utilize it for other purposes. But the penny produces around, I think it's like 115 to 200 units per year. So that would be included in that unit total. Yes, there. So around 450 units, that includes penny.
Any more questions? Anything?
So Emma spoke to an in-depth conversation. We're gonna have that conversation at the February 10th work session. Where she'll get down in the weeds a little bit on some of the tools that we're gonna be using to make this happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to set up for our last presentation of the day. This is for the viewing audience as well as everyone attending today. We're going to end on parking. We are at 11:24. So anyone that came to learn more about planning and development, we will have that at a later date. So just want to announce that as well as introduce our last topic for the day. And then just one little check-in with council at the conclusion of the parking presentation. Second step back.
While Michelle's doing that, I'll tell you, I drew the short straw, okay? Got a few presentations today, so I'll do my best to kind of go through this. It's kind of long. It's about 40 slides, but I'll hit some highlights on. So hopefully it won't take as long here. So again, Paul Callen, Transportation Director here with the City of Raleigh, and I've got Kenneth Ritchie, Assistant Transportation Director, to kind of help me out on any details that y'all may want to know. So today's just going to be an overview of parking, kind of soup to nuts. I kind of tell people under the hood. I'm just going to kind of share and kind of go back in time here. So agenda, talking about the parking program, how it kind of came about, timeline. We'll touch on off street, go to on street. We'll talk about just kind of overall program summary, the state of the parking enterprise, and then we'll kind of end here with future considerations. So some of the terms you probably see in some of your agenda items here, I just want to kind of touch on here that we frankly use in the parking world each day. On street kind of speaks for itself. Off street, everything kind of dealing with our decks. Curbside management, which is a lot of the agenda items that y'all see coming in front of you. Commercial loading zones, your residential permits and things of that nature. Transient parkers, that's basically who comes to our downtown to our decks there and kind of stays a few hours or all day kind of thing. Then your monthly parkers, which are probably more geared towards a lot of your folks that are working in the downtown area, metered, and then parks here, which is parking access and revenue control system. It's basically all of our back of house, handles our financial component here with parking. And then P3 here, any kind of public-private partnerships that we may have. Our timeline here. So kind of going back to 84. Okay, city basically got in the parking deck business to basically generate economic development. Okay, that was really what it was back in the early 80s. Kind of a timeline here. You kind of see we had the big recession in 2007, 2012. We had Kimberly Horn do a parking study in 2017. We had a basically a rate increase here for off-street and on-street here back in 2018. Y'all may remember Matthew Curry, former parking manager. He kind of helped guide through that. And then, of course, kind of where we are coming through COVID and where we are today. So I kind of tell people parking is an ecosystem. Okay, you touch one lever, it probably affects something else. Okay, so that's how we have to look at basically the parking ecosystem. We got our off-street component, our on-street, our physical side, and our curb management. So off-street review. So before I get into this, I'll tell you off-street review is going to be talking about parking decks. There's two things I want you to know about parking decks. They're expensive to build. They're expensive to maintain. Okay, just remember that as we're going through this part here on off-street review. So if you look over to the far left, you'll kind of see City Hall, which several of y'all keep me honest on the conditions of City Hall. You'll see that's our oldest deck. So 42 years. Okay, it's been out there 42 years. Just keep an eye on that orange box because I'm going to use that as an example. Okay, as we go further into the presentation here with City Hall. Kind of work across to the right here, you'll kind of see as decks came online here. I'll mention Caber Street, a deck, very unusual situation. We've got a 40-year lease out there on the Caber Street deck. Bottom line is we own the deck, we don't own the property. Okay, that was a economic development tool that the powers that be back then made that decision. So again, we don't own the dirt, we own the deck. Kind of coming on over here, we've got a P3 agreement with the Blunt Street deck. So think about the Sky House apartment complex. That's kind of what that agreement is about. That's an opportunity, frankly, where you'll see the ability to kind of share the deck. Folks that maybe live in the building, maybe navigate out to their work, and those that are coming into downtown to work. So that's kind of that kind of shared agreement. So that's kind of what the Blunt Street deck is all about here. And then you get all the way over here to the right is the Dillon, another P3 we did, and that was back during the opening of the Raleigh Union Station. When we opened basic Raleigh Union Station, Kane Development was looking at the Dillon site. Basically, we had no parking over there at the Raleigh Union Station. Okay, so we had to partner, and we took that partnership with Kane back in the day to basically have it's about 308 spaces in the Dillon deck to basically have that for our customers over at Raleigh Union Station. Okay, that's kind of big picture here, construction. But again, keep an eye on City Hall, 1984.
Real quick, how long is that Dillon agreement?
I don't know if we got that. We can get that. I don't know if I've got that off the top of my head.
That's a condominium arrangement?
Yeah.
So that'd be as a condominium, so that.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's, I think, a little complicated.
When you say we have 308 spaces, that's for our employees? or-
Now, that's for basically customers
Oh,
that are using, the Amtrak service, things that, the rail over there. So
they're still paying
Mhm.
and then we get that.
That's right. There's an agreement between the development and us on there.
Mhm.
All right, so just a big snapshot here of where our off-street decks are, and kind of locations here. You'll kind of see, I've highlighted the bottom four here. So, 11, y'all are probably very familiar with. That's the Omni site. Okay. 12 is over here. Many of y'all have been involved in the, Moore Square East development. That's some surface lots that we have over there as well. Lot G, 13. Over here where we had Red Hat, we had a lot that we had purchased in advance, thinking about the convention center expansion. So again, that lot, and then 14 here is basically where Fire Station 1 is going to be going. Okay, so we kind of put these out here because these are basically going to be taken offline for us. So like, in other words, we're not going to be able to use those going forward when we're looking at parking allocations, everything out here.
Well, those are public and private decks?
So these are all, these right here are all public, for us.
Okay.
All right, so when you kind of dive into some of those agreements, out here, and Kenneth's probably got some more numbers here. At the end of the day, basically, we got roughly approximately 8,000 spaces to play with, okay? But 55% of that's contracts. So think about Red Hat. We got about 600 contractual spaces with Red Hat. I just mentioned the Blunt Street. We've got contractual agreements with Sky House, things of that nature. Charter Square is another big one. We got like four, private entities that are, have utilization with the Charter Square deck. And again, this was all about kind of the shared agreement approach of, hey, we build a deck and half the time it's empty. So we were thinking long-term about, the users of the building, okay? Those that may leave during the day, we've got an empty deck, those that are coming into downtown. So that's a lot of kind of what some of these are here. But at the end of the day, we've got about 55% of contractual agreements out here with some of these decks.
It would be helpful if you could split that out, not now, but deck by deck.
Yep.
Because I always had questions about the Cabarrus deck and redevelopment opportunity, but don't know how much of that is contracted.
And we've got all those numbers and we can give you that detail. All right, so here's just a snapshot of kind of where we are with our deck rates, okay? I'm gonna go into every detail here, but really at the end of the day, our max daily rate in most of our decks is $14. As you get closer to the Convention Center Performing Arts deck, the price raises a little bit, so you can kind of see what that difference is here on 15, but this is just basically a snapshot of kind of where we are with our deck rates. Okay, down here at the bottom, we got a special event rate that's basically in place for anything over 10,000 people that are coming downtown. That's a rate that we have. And then, of course, I mentioned to you earlier about the Blunt Street not accessible again at 7 p.m., 7 a.m. That's from contractual agreements. We just kind of put that as an example of what we have in place there. So just again, just kind of snapshot on where we are with parking deck rates. All right, here's just a snapshot of benchmarks. You can kind of see here, again, depending on kind of what deck you're parking in, kind of determines what those hourly rates are and max dailies here. You can kind of see other cities that we benchmark against. I will say, based on what we saw with our benchmarks, we're kind of frankly one of the first to introduce the 2-hour free parking. Okay, and I'll just tell you right now, Wilmington Street's having a conversation and Durham, both of them right now to do at least 1 hour free parking. They said Raleigh's kind of set the bar. So my point is other municipalities in the state are watching.
Paul, when you look at these benchmarks, how do you think about benchmarking North Hills or Briar Creek or areas that are directly competing with downtown locally versus picking cities?
So let me pick on North Hills. So North Hills just introduced actually a parking rate over there with their development back in September 25. It's, don't hold me to it, but I think I'm right. Basically, the first 3 hours is free, but you actually have to go on the app to get that 3 hours. Okay, have to go on their app to get the 3 hours. After that, then you've got fairly significant charges based on ranges. So 3 hours to, it's in there. 3 hours to
3 to 5 hours is $6, and then 5 to 12 hours, it goes up just to 12.
So kind of progressive.
$6 an hour?
Progressive pricing, as you can see there. So kind of new what we're seeing, Mayor, on that. So North Hills is kind of, breaking the ice on some of these larger scale developments. And frankly, again, I told y'all, parking decks are very expensive. So I think people are starting to find that they've got to look at revenue sources out.
What about Ironworks? Do they charge or?
I don't know on that. I'd have to verify that. So I'm not sure on that. But again, just understand, what's happening today may not be what's happening tomorrow. So again, North Hills used to be all free and now they kind of introduced that. So that may just be frankly a model that we end up seeing going on some of these other large scale, multi-use developments here. So again, just kind of a snapshot on benchmarks. Over here on the right kind of tells you those that got special event pricing and variations on that, just depending on the event where it's at here. Our current programs that we kind of have in the off-street, the small business program, which many of you will probably remember, we brought that on back in 2021, back during COVID. Okay. Criteria was restaurants, retail, personal services, less than 50 employees. Basically, each business got 10 cards each. Council put a cap on that at 400. We basically got 303 active cards in that program today. The 2-hour free program, which y'all are familiar with, we started that pilot back in late 2024. We basically, based on council's direction, we've extended that out to June. No charge for the first 2 hours, and the 6 specified garages there is active from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because after 7 p.m. our garages go free. Electric vehicle charges. So basically, in a nutshell, we pay for the electricity on all of our EV stations. Okay, so just know if I have an EV car, I'm going to pay the you know, either in a deck or I'm paying at a on street. Again, the electricity though is back on us on that. Then the downtown evening employee program. To be honest with you, this thing's been around for many, many years, probably 20 years. We have nobody in the program right now because frankly, probably folks are leaning in on the small business program that we enacted. That was a program back in the, and still around, there's just nobody in it right now, that basically, you think about your chefs, your waiters, waitresses, those service industries, basically they could come in, pay the city $20. They could come in after 3 p.m. Their car just needed to leave by 6 a.m. Okay, $20 a month pass. Because of probably the small business, it's probably why you don't have anybody in it. That program has been around about 20 years.
How much is a small business one?
300 people. 300.
Yeah, you got 303 people in it right
The
now.
cost?
Oh, so we've got that 303 people at $25 a month, whatever that math is. So that's what that's costing the city right now.
They're not paying.
That's right. That's right. It's just so, it's,
For
you know,
small, it's free for the participants.
That's right.
in the small business.
yeah. But back to the enterprise fund, that's just an impact for us. All right, so some contractual services here. So we've got the car park, which manages basically all of our off-street management there. That's about $2.3 million a year. They operate the 10 garages and our surface lots, manage personnel, deal with patron issues. They basically kind of rogue around from a security and safety element, support any kind of ADA accessibility needs, and manage special events. They accept and process payments when needed down there, especially around the Performing Arts and Convention Center. They're on site down there, and then they basically track when we need a lot of data. We're working with a car park to get that data and get that usage there. So any kind of incidental complaints or whatever, they're just kind of our eyes and ears out there, kind of floating around in the decks and bringing things to our attention. To go into that, Bill King's in the back here with DRA. We've got roughly about a $500,000 contract with them over the year. Here's their hours of service, 7 days a week, 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. Basically, to keep me honest on this, I think 8 dedicated ambassadors on site that are basically roving around through our decks there. They aid citizens and report concerns, RPD and parking staff. And then here at the bottom is SCADATA. That was a big investment for us starting out about 3 years ago. So we had a lot of old equipment, 30 years old, more in our parking decks. This is a big lift for us and a big investment, about $3.5 million, basically put new parking deck equipment that frankly gives us better data and better decision making on how we need to make changes in our deck there. So again, that's a one-time cost. And then we got roughly about $100,000 on just the revenue side that we have to work through with SCADATA for that. Again, we were able to kind of remove our booth attendants, kind of have a roving ambassadors now, kind of help people out. And then again, it gave us improved data collection and technology. All right, so here's a snapshot of just kind of where we are back before COVID, 18, 19 here. You kind of see where we were with Off Street here. So about 12.9 here at 18, over here at about 11.4 here for FY25. So what is that? About 1.5 million. Right. And here's what I would say that I've seen, because we all speculated every year once we went COVID, what do we think next year is going to be? We just didn't know. I mean, but with the hybrid model and flexibility and working from home, what I'll say we have seen has just been a modest increase, not anything that's really, changing, moving the needle out here in a very fast approach. So Whether that continues or not, that's just kind of the model and data of what we've seen here.
Is there a way to later let us show, based on this change, what years we did rate changes? And then
We could probably build that.
and then put on top of that as well, the number of vehicles. Because it may be one of those things where it's starting to slowly increment up. If we have a rate change, our vehicle count could still have.
Yeah, now I'll tell you the challenge with that is, anything back in those days, we had terrible data. We had the old system. Okay, terrible data. We're putting Band-Aids and tapes on stuff. I mean, that's just where we were.
Gotcha.
And so we just may have some limitations on what we can do on that. So,
I mean, I know it dipped, but how did it not crater in 2020? I'm just curious how it. Like, we turned off, we didn't charge for on-street parking for like an entire year, so how was there any revenue?
now this is with the decks here. So
Oh,
people
off
still.
street, sorry,
yeah, so
sorry.
people still coming in.
And people had contracts, they already, they were already, I got it.
All right, so, probably no surprise here. I'll just kind of point out, City Center deck, which is where Red Hat Convention Center, Performing Arts, you kind of see they perform, well, just again, some contractual services we have with Red Hat. And then just the location of what's happening down with Convention Center, Performing Arts, really no surprise to me on that. You can just kind of see the other decks here, each bar color, you can kind of see the FY year there. So that's just kind of a snapshot over the last 7 years here on garage revenues. All right, so I try to simplify this. But one time we had 10 houses, okay, 10 parking decks. You have a mortgage on each one of those. Got 7 of those paid off. We got 3. Still, we owe debt on. Okay. Here's a snapshot on that. So, this is the debt service we have out here, roughly about $36 million that we're still paying on parking decks. Going back to 2007 with Lunch Street, working our way over to the Convention Center and Charter Square. So again, kind of a snapshot on where we are with, the parking debt there related to parking structures.
When would those be paid off?
I would have to get that information. We probably work with finance on that. All right, so, y'all remember I told you, remember that orange box, City Hall, 1984? I'll just go to that one since it's the highest one. Just use that as an example. What we've got here is Kimberly Horn, I told you, maybe I didn't mention, so Kimberly Horn did a deck assessment for us in 2021. Basically said, here's the 3 columns they gave us, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And basically each tier, represents some scale of what we need to be doing from a deck maintenance standpoint. Tier 1 kind of, hey, these are general things you need to be doing. Tier 3, these are more immediate things you need to be doing. But this is a snapshot here of just the priorities for priority 1 on City Hall. We got $1.2 million worth of priority 1 that needs to be done out there. So when y'all call me and tell me y'all so tired of that water dropping on your head, third floor, let me just tell you, that's an $800,000 investment to waterproof the deck. Okay. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Just want to kind of give you a scale.
Umbrella.
That's right. So just keep that in mind, as we kind of go into this. So that's really what this is. So this is just broken down into what the total cost is for a priority 1, 2, and 3. And on the left-hand side is really what that priority 1 is. Okay, so that kind of just gives you a sense of kind of where we are. And likely, I would say, some of the older decks are going to need more attention. That's pretty common sense there. All right, so if you remember, I told you all those spaces in each one of the parking decks. This is a general annual cost per space. Okay. We got a low range and an upper range, and I'll get to the next slide and it'll kind of make sense here. So this is what we should generally be spending to maintain our parking decks out here, okay? Low range and a high range. So this is where we ought to be. This is where we should be, somewhere between 2.7 and $3.9 million. Where we should be. based on industry standards out here on parking decks. I think we're around, I think it's around about $1 million annually is what we're spending. Okay, so we're getting further behind.
And I think an important note on this number, this is just to have the decks to what would be an acceptable standard with where we are with them today. That's not adding.
It's not new building, was there? Okay.
Does that include
Maintain what we
elevators?
have.
That includes elevators?
Yes. Yep. Kind of just gives you an idea of where we are. All right, so that was, yes.
So before you leave that, there is one deck outstanding that we've got an issue around, right? That we need to do fire suppression.
Yes.
Repairs. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so Convention Center deck, if y'all remember when we did Fayetteville Street, made a lot of changes with Convention Center. Marriott came online. We built the whole underground Convention Center deck. So you gotta think, that was 2008. Okay, so we're at a time now, we've got to go in and replace the sprinkler head system. It's about a $3.5 million investment we've got to do right now. That's got to be done. Okay? If it's not done, we have to shut the deck down. Okay? Just want that to sink in a minute. Those are things that have to be done. But you have no choice on them.
I know you've got this still to go, but I just wanted to insert, given how much time, like you hired Kimley Horn. There's a lot of things we haven't even talked about here, like the economic development today versus 1984, which it's constantly asking us about parking, public safety, and getting feet on the ground in downtown, how we're competing with North Hills and Ironworks. And so public safety, reputation, right? Just the branding of the capital city. And I just wonder, is it not worth getting another specialty person who's really an expert in parking in environments like Raleigh to look at all of those factors? Because what I just don't want to be penny wise, pound foolish, try to balance these books. I mean, obviously public safety, and infrastructural integrity, super important.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to balance these books and then we shoot ourselves in the foot by losing major economic development, projects, looking at warehouse district. We end up with a lot more crime that cost us millions of dollars over in the police department because we're trying to balance over here. So
Now, great point. So the mayor's about 15, 20 slides ahead of me.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be talking about that at the end,
Okay.
just to that very point.
I know we're compressed on time, but I think from the mayor, previous conversation is, 8,000 spots for downtown. Is that the right number, the wrong number? Don't know the utilization. You told me it was contracted. And then certain potentially decks that could be sold
Okay.
and create a fund to help with the maintenance. I'm always confused about the Cabarrus Street deck. The condition, its purpose, its location with Convention Center across the street. So I don't know if that's a conversation or a future conversation, but I don't know the utilization of that deck. I saw that 533, don't know how many is used for the Sheridan, but to me, that's where I'm thinking. And it's a key development site. It is not the most beautiful parking deck and it's overlooking the Convention Center, now Red Hat. So to me, I don't know if it's today, but certainly a conversation. Is 8,000 the right number? And then if we can sell certain parcels, and I don't know if we can dedicate those funds to maintaining the other decks, but just want to know what our thinking is.
So y'all about 15 slides ahead.
Okay, all right.
I'm gonna get there, okay? Because
Okay.
y'all were thinking where we've been thinking about our assets and where we go with this in the future. Is there a need and that kind of thing? So I'm gonna touch on that kind of at the end here. Now I'm gonna transition over to the, and look at this whole kind of parking ecosystem at the very end. So the on-street review here. So again, this is one of our parking on meters we installed back in 2018. I'll just kind of tell you, the on-street, I kind of say is kind of plug and play. That's kind of how I tell people. It's plug and play, different than off-street. Off-streets has got a lot of strings attached to it, structures, maintenance needs, things of that nature. So off-street, totally different animal, much easier animal for us. All right, so just a snapshot. We've got 280 meters throughout the city, roughly about 1,900 meter spaces, 3,400 unmetered spaces. So basically Those are in locations where there are no meters, but there's a time on the sign that says, hey, 2-hour parking, that kind of thing. You can kind of see here with our own meter here, we have over 1 million transactions, in FY 25. 56% of that is basically using the Passport, mobile app. So we continue to lean on technology and trying to push people that have that ability to kind of go that way. Because what I tell people is, look, you can lessen the times you go up and hitting a button on a key. That helps us on the maintenance standpoint. You know what I'm saying? You can get longer longevity out of something like that. So again, we try to push the technology piece because frankly, these things can last longer for us. Here's a rough idea of the on-street rates. Okay. What we noticed back in 2018, downtown, Glenwood South, and Hillsborough Street were all 3 different animals. Each one of those kind of areas needed something different. Okay. Just depending on the use, you know, Glenwood South, traditionally more on the weekends, nights, that kind of thing. You got downtown, traditionally kind of been during the day. Then you got Hillsborough Street, we got a whole university around. So a lot of different needs there. So what we learned in 2018 was there was not going to be one size that fits all in the on-street rates, which is why you kind of see these variations here, depending on whether you're in downtown or like Hillsborough Street, and then you see some changes in the hours here. Hillsborough Street goes longer because they were having students park going into a 1-hour class, okay, kind of abusing the system. So work with Jeff Mercer and that team said, we really want to push the on-street, you know, a little later on that to have turnover. Businesses want to turnover. So again, not one size fits all on the on-street. Snapshot here of just on-street. Much like in Austin, I've seen this in Sacramento and other cities. Some use progressive pricing, but depending on where the demand is and what that demand is, you know, this many hours is this, and then it's progressive pricing. It's kind of like what North Hills has basically done out there. So that's kind of a model, frankly, that some use out here.
And in Raleigh, any place outside of North Hills, Hillsborough Street, downtown, that we think have metered, paid parking, do you know?
Say that again, ma'am.
In Raleigh, outside of downtown, Hillsborough Street, and now North Hills, are there other paid?
Yeah, so we are always looking to expand, okay, just based on where the need is, development's going, where those pressure points are. So I would definitely say, from a meter standpoint, we're always looking to expand, and that's working with the community on that. Again, that's something we're always constantly looking at.
But those are the only places in Raleigh now that have paid.
Yes, yes.
The Rockway, is that what it's called? The one down by Dick's?
They have
charges, paid parking.
Yeah, and to that year, so they do.
Off street. So I think the question is, do we have meters anywhere other than downtown and Hillsborough Street?
No.
Now, 5 points maybe?
No, we don't have meters there. No. So again, a little bit of a snapshot here of just kind of where those rates are. You see Raleigh at the top. You can kind of see some of our competitors here in the area on where they are. Citation fees, I don't want to linger on this. This is just kind of a snapshot on where we are. Y'all remember, many of you, we had to up them up because we were having troubles over there with the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood spillover from the Glenwood South. So you can kind of see this was something we probably did 2 to 3 years ago on that, and up those fees over there, try to help the community out. Current programs here in the on-street here, we got a residential parking permit zone. We got 13 of them, roughly about 3,400 spaces. We just brought some new eligibility into that program, hopefully help with some of the issues and concerns that some of y'all council members have had on that. Handicap violations here. So interesting enough, all the handicap violations we get, those revenues go back to Wake County. So that's a state ordinance out there that we have. Street arrears, I just mentioned here, 18 locations, about $1,500 a permit per year. And then we're happy to say with the iAccess, there's an ADA survey for folks that can basically scan a QR code at, I thought it was about 28 locations. Basically tell us how we're doing. You know, are ADA spaces in the right spot? Hey, I'm having trouble here with lifts. So it gives us feedback on the street on that. So that's something we've rolled out here on the last few months. Here's some contractual services, much like on the off street that we have, Passport mobile app that I mentioned. That's about $270, $270,000 a year. Again, that's back of house software. Again, along with the enforcement form, so you can kind of see roughly about 900,000 plus a year just for the Passport app. And that, of course, is our centralized, basically back of house citation platform that we use here to manage all of these things here, appeals and things of that nature here. So citations, permits that are coming through the residential permit program, all that's kind of handled through that. Here's on-street revenue. So back to Councilmember Lambert Bell. So you kind of see that drop here. And again, kind of what we've seen, you know, again, the on-street has been healthier, I would say, than the off-street. Okay.
I'm surprised that didn't drop more.
So
We didn't charge for a year, right? I don't understand how it didn't just crater.
this is the information that we've got here. Kind of see where we are over here, roughly about 2.4 million going into what we've had in FY 25. Citation revenue here, you can kind of see what this kind of frankly tells me, what I've seen just based on the complaints and concerns that come in. There's just more community concerns, you know, they reach out to us on making sure we are enforcing what these permit zones are that are out there. So again, we get a lot of feedback from the residents community.
So did that come to us or is that to the county?
It comes to us.
Okay.
All right, so here's just a snapshot of kind of revenue versus expenses here with on street. So you can kind of see, just like I told you, we're just in a healthier position with on street. Okay. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, kind of pays for itself, you know, really at the end of the day, when you're just looking kind of boots on the ground and the revenues that we're bringing in on the on street. So no surprise there. All right, so this is where I'm gonna just jump into kind of parking overall summary.
I'm trying to understand those numbers. There are a lot of private lots throughout downtown, and I know you don't capture those numbers. So I'm just wondering how those private lots, which tend to be surface lots, particularly in Glenwood South, where I know it's a lot of surface lots. So do you have any data on how the private surface lots are doing? And I know their citations just towing, so it's a little bit different creature. So we can understand a fuller picture about the private.
I would say we're probably more apt to, if the car park is managing some of those private lots, we can probably work with them to get that kind of information. And honestly, we've got relationships with Power Parking and some other ones that we can probably get some sense of what that would be out there. All right, so just kind of a parking summary here. One kind of go, and I tell y'all, and I tell this really to staff in general. I'm all about the customer experience. Okay, parking specifically. Frank, it's the first thing you see coming in, your first experience when you go park in a deck. It's your last experience that you have before you leave the city. Parking experience is very important for me. It's something I continue to lean on staff that we got to do more. Here's some things that we're doing, thinking about. We've got, of course, I mentioned the SCADATA, so Wilmington Street deck, and I'll go into a little more detail, is one that we've had interest in selling. Okay. I'll tell you locally, I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on it, at least locally, because of the economy, haven't had as much interest. Okay. Not saying nationally, we wouldn't have someone that maybe would come in and want to buy the deck and plant a flag. I'm just not sensing it locally right now, just because investors are holding on to money in certain areas. So strategically, just haven't seen that ask come locally.
Why would we care if it's a local or?
So what I would say is, that doesn't matter. I'm just saying we haven't had any local interest.
No one's knocking on our door.
Right, no one's knocking on, and I'll tell you if they are, They want us to sell it for 50 cents on the dollar.
Okay, wouldn't take a loss.
Bingo. So we have to, so I want everybody to hear
Is,
this.
is that the one Fayetteville, one street, mid-block?
So this is Wilmington Street.
On Bay Street.
By the bus station.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep, so this is Wilmington Street. So I'll just tell you, again, we want to sell some of these assets. Wilmington Street probably one of them. Question that we have to decide is, are we willing to put it on the market and potentially not get the value that what may be on it in a couple of years?
No, that's.
That is really the $1 million question at the end of the day. So I want everybody to understand, because this comes up, I'm very interested in getting rid of some of these assets. I think for us strategically in the future, it's smart of us to do this. I think we have to decide as a body, is right now the time to do that now. So again, I'll touch on that a little bit more. Some city branding here, y'all see at the City Hall. We try to do some new signage. We've got some pictures or whatever on this. And then, of course, the cameras, the gracious of the city manager here, I'm pushing forward on getting a more robust camera system in place from a security standpoint, to basically have more eyes and working with RPD on that. So again, I kind of touch on a few of those coming up here. So as y'all seen, kind of this was a pilot for us. So we want to try it. These are just kind of things we want to expand. Again, from a city branding standpoint, this is who we are. Please come, those type of things. So this is something we've got in place now. Let me just point right here. See, this is pretty clean looking concrete right there. Just cost us $30,000 for power washout. Okay, 30,000. So I'm just giving you an idea that anything you do related to a parking deck, it costs us a lot of money. Okay. All right, this is over in Wilmington Street. So back probably a couple of years ago, we were getting a lot of interest on Wilmington Street, and then all of a sudden things just really just kind of fell off. So we at that time did not include new parking deck equipment, because frankly, like, why are we gonna go spend city taxpayer money if we're gonna be able to get rid of it? Well, now that it's cooled off, so we've got to make a decision. We are making a decision that we're gonna go invest and put in basically new excavator equipment, which is what's in our other decks. So we held off on Wilmington for a while just to see what the economy is going to do. So this is just some betterments that we're going to be doing over here with the Wilmington Street deck. So existing, what we want to go towards. Parking deck opportunities. I know the mayor's had some conversations like marbles. You can kind of see, I hate this old roof over here that's right across the street. Y'all are probably familiar with it. So these are some things that we want to do to try to move the needle. Again, all about that experience, remove that, put our city branding over here on the Wilmington Street deck. Again, just some small incremental things. This is the Moore Square. Y'all can see existing over here. This is what an opportunity could look like for us here. Just with Moore Square, more artwork. Again, better treatments and surfaces out here, just for that user experience. This is Nightscope. Kenneth actually had this experience in Louisville, Kentucky. This is actually basically a robot that maneuvers around in the parking decks. It's basically could be our eyes and ears, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has an alert system on it. You want to touch on, you had the experience over in Louisville actually with this.
So I hadn't seen it until I got to Louisville for the parking conference, and I pull into the deck at 10:30 at night, and I see this robot in front of me and wasn't sure what it was. But what it is it's kind of an all-in-one. It provides security. It's got direct connect link through buttons on the machine to 911. It can do audible alerts. If it's catching activities, things like that, it can provide those audible alerts. And again, it just kind of provides an additional set of eyes, kind of 24/7, that can give people a little bit more comfort of, we do, in addition to camera systems, this can be another set of eyes that's kind of patrolling our decks. Either in addition to people, or certainly it can kind of make that go.
And basically, the data out here with this right now is, working with the, police forces, they've seen a significant drop where these have been used. And basically, you know, when you got eyes and ears on you in video, it makes you think twice if you want to do something bad. So again, they've seen some significant drops in their decks with this. This right here, about 10 grand a month. Okay, it's about $120,000 a year. You deploy that in one day. Okay, again, just kind of give you a scale of what these things cost. All right, so here's just a breakdown. Just want to kind of give you a sense. So you think about our own street that basically goes free after 5 p.m. It's free on nights and weekends, much like our parking decks. This gives you a snapshot of basically what I call the free parking that we're giving away today, just based on our hours in nature. So it kind of just gives you a sense of what we're doing today. This is for garages. This is for home street. All right, this is a snapshot again, and let me just preference by saying, I just want y'all to know, and part of my job and staff's job is, as we have to lean in on the general fund, this being an enterprise fund parking, I want to give y'all the best information that we can. Because I know each one of y'all has objectives and priorities that y'all want to happen in the city, just in other areas. So it's my responsibility to kind of daylight these concerns and hard choices that y'all have to make as you're thinking about the budget here. So that's really, I don't want to put you back in a corner with these kind of things. So again, just trying to get this out here for y'all to be thinking. These are things we just have to be thinking about with our parking enterprise fund. Small business program, the 2-hour free parking. I mentioned about the electricity that we're paying a year, the residential permit program, which we're not solving on that. You know, we're not getting what we should be to even make us whole on the residential permit program. Handicap violations and streeteries. That totals about $1.5 million. So I just kind of tell people, each one of these things add up at the end of the day, okay, for us. And it doesn't allow us to do the things, frankly, a lot of things we want to do. Again, I'm all about the customer experience at the end of the day. So I just kind of want to give you a kind of a snapshot of the impact of programs have on our parking fund. This is kind of the state. We're getting almost here to the end. I think we're pretty much there. See back in general fund and FY 25, 2.5 million. The general fund in FY 26 doesn't include the sprinkler system there, 230,000, and then projected. I mean, what I'll kind of tell you, highlight on this one is to keep the customer experience that we had today. It's about $20 million. That's status quo. Just keep the wheels on the bus. Okay, it's not any new shiny nickels, anything. We're bringing in roughly just shy of 16 million. You kind of see where we are on this. So I just want y'all to kind of know that's just the state of parking. All right, future consideration. So Sadia had mentioned the enterprise department or enterprise divisions and departments are coming back to the council first or second week in March. We probably on our side are going to have to anticipate some rate changes. That means we're going to be working with our partners, DRA, Gilbert Street, things of that nature. So we want to go ahead and daylight that as we're thinking about the budget going forward. So likely we'll be presenting some options and what that could look like. And I said options, okay, what that would look like for the council consideration in March. And then of course, based on that direction, we continue to work with our stakeholders on what that looks like at the end of the day. Program considerations. I go back, let me just pick on small business. Okay. Small business, we've got 303 people in it right now, $120 a month. That's an impact of whatever those dollars are. So I have to ask the council, is that a program you want to consider going forward? You know, we really stood that up back during COVID. So again, these are just things y'all have to think about as a body and whether you want to continue it, change it, modify it, whatever the case may be. Asset strategy. I told you my goal is to get rid of some of these assets. So we want to maybe bring back a little bit more consideration about what some of that could be on selling some of these decks. Let me just pick on, and this will probably be something that'll be in front of y'all. We'll work with our real estate group to say, hey, do we want to get an RFI? Request for information on interest in our parking decks. Again, nationally, could be some national firms that want to come in and plant a flag here. So that's probably some consideration that'll be in front of you at that March Enterprise meeting as well. So just be thinking about that. And then to your point, Mayor, it just happens to be the last. So the parking study, we did that almost 10 years ago, okay, 2017. We're just in a different place in here, very different place. So we would want to look at a new parking study that would dive into a lot of these things that frankly probably were not looked at with the 2017 parking study. That would be our goal, to advance a new parking study over the next year. So again, I think this is the last slide. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I'm just a realist to say this is what you need to know. As I said earlier, with parking decks specifically, they're expensive to build and expensive to maintain at the end of the day.
Yeah, this may be a question for Marshall. I don't know the full plan for the City Hall complex. What is the plan for the parking deck? Because it's the only deck I know that says full. And I know it's a very small deck. Is there any other plans for it, or it's just gonna stay as is?
Yes, so you may recall, we did a master plan for that entire block.
Yeah, no, I wasn't part of that, so I
And
didn't know.
the master plan, contemplates another tower where R&B sits today,
Okay,
and contemplates a P3 that would build another deck.
Got
with
it.
Another tower on top of that.
okay.
I think you're seeing that sign say full now because we have hundreds of construction workers next door.
Got it.
So I think it's why you're seeing that happen, so. It's lower floor, low block off.
Yeah, blocked up for.
Yeah.
And on that full deck issue, I do think it impacts people who are coming to our meetings
Yes.
and who are signing up for public comment or
And we're fully
hearings.
aware of that, exactly. And-
Are we giving them any, guidance, or is there any communication?
We're just gonna talk about the process with your attendants sitting there.
Yes, yeah, so, I told you, with the SCADA equipment, the goal is we don't have an attendant there. But what we've seen at City Hall specifically, because of the public needs and what we basically have had to man that on those special days of council or whatever, to try to provide that customer service to say, and frankly, try to save space where we can for our users that are attending public meetings. So again, sometimes it may not look full to people. So if you look out your window, look on the top deck and it's empty, it might be for a reason, okay? And that's what we're trying to salvage what we can for those big days where we know folks are gonna be coming downtown, so.
Where are we telling folks to go?
So Car Park is very good about, because they manage a lot of other parking decks, that you can go to, like the Pendo site, and things of that nature, other private owned decks, down on like Target and Blunt, for example. So they're real good about directing people on kind of where to go once we get that capacity.
Yeah, I think, thanks for all this data. Obviously took a lot of effort to compile. I think what I had thought we would be seeing are like a few scenarios, like if you raised the deck rates this much, you generate this much revenue, which would bring you that much closer to full or whatever. It does look like there's a lot of like when I look at these benchmark cities for both the decks and the street meters, it looks like there's a lot of opportunity, like there's a lot of plasticity, and especially like the on-street meters are paying for themselves. Can we raise those rates and further cross-subsidize on the decks?
So that's our next steps, is to bring those options back to you in March on what that could look like, okay? If we push and pull, I say it's all about levers at the end of the day, okay? If we push this lever a little bit, this is the outcome. So that's what our plan is, to bring you back in March, just what some of those options are when you push different levers out.
Councilmember Pat, just one clarification. So there are limitations on how we can use the on-street revenues, and we actually cannot subsidize our off-street revenues with our on-street.
Fine.
So just as we think to March and we start bringing back those considerations, that ecosystem and those levers, we're gonna have to think about them kind of in concert, but understanding that they can't really, certainly we can't go from on-street to subsidize off-street.
Any more questions?
Thank y'all again.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
So that was our final presentation. However, I do have just one thing, just for council, just as a reminder. You had a presentation earlier this week, just kind of set you up for a discussion we hope we'd be able to have today around big ideas. But you have a packet with a full report. I would like you all to look at it and review it. It will be in your inboxes electronically. But if you all wouldn't mind taking a look at it, and then staff will send you a short survey so we can kind of get your feedback, and we'll move to our next step. We'll have further conversations as you all go through budget deliberations. So, Mayor, would you like to conclude our council retreat?
We'll, formally end our council retreat. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.